right. Welcome to the Tougies Take podcast, the number one hockey podcast in all of Slovenia, according to Apple Podcast stats. So I learned a few fun facts about Slovenia. It's home to Europe's most stunning caves. You can ski there. They like wine. They like bees. They have a large bear population. And we love you too, Slovenia. Thanks for listening. I hope there's more facts to learn.
It's one of those things. I mean, the Slovenian fact of the week coming soon to a podcast near you. And again, feel free to contact and potentially, let's not say harass, but try to influence at least one of the Kopitars to get on this show, because who doesn't want to hear from Gaspar Kopitar? And speaking of who doesn't want to hear from, Deej, it's finally time. We have another guest on the show this week.
It is.
We knew pretty much all season long, because the Sabers have been hot trash all season long,
Hot trash.
We would have him on the show at some point. And the shoe finally dropped the day after the previous podcast, where Ralph Kruger was finally fired. So it's the perfect time we bring on one of the other unofficial third members of this particular podcast, our buddy Architect. The pride of Buffalo is finally here. Texky, how you doing?
I'm so happy. I am so happy to finally be on. I've pandered to the masses. I've been in your Twitch chat every day.
Mm-hmm. You really did.
I'm just finally here.
You really
I feel
did
like
campaign.
I've won.
This is your victory.
I should get the key to Buffalo.
This is your victory.
Byron Brown, I'm
season.
coming. Byron Brown, bring that ass over here.
Incredible. So, as we always do, before we get into talking about current things going on with your horrible team, because for some reason, Deej, that's just the trend that we've created, is we only have our friends on when their team is suffering some sort of turmoil and misery. I wanted to ask you, as we do, your history first and foremost as a hockey fan. What led you to this point of being a miserable, miserable Sabres fan?
Oh my God. I just even talking about it, just bringing back all these memories of failure. And the first game I clearly remember was in, oh my God, that's the most classic Buffalo meme. I would say the first game I ever saw was in about 1996 with my grandmother on the old 2-box TV, wooden, 6 channels. Seeing the San Jose Sharks in those horrific teal uniforms.
Hot take.
I just remember being just awestruck at Dominik Hasek just stopping everything, facing 64 shots a game, and Buffalo winning 1-0. And I feel like I've always been more of a Bills fan, but Sabres have always been my second love. So just watching Dominik Hasek as a little kid, not knowing what an absolute freak that man was, and always playing in the garage, trying to do a split and just breaking everything, every bone in my body. But just growing up in Buffalo, there's only 2 things to do, and it's shovel snow and watch Buffalo Bills and Sabres. So, it's kind of how it got started.
So essentially what I'm getting from this, it was just another one of those stories of, oh, I grew up, the Sabres were on TV, I'm a Sabres fan, it's where I'm from, it makes sense.
Yeah. There's nothing else to do in Buffalo from I'd say November 1st until April 15th. There is nothing to do in Buffalo except watch sports and shovel snow.
Fair enough. So along the lines then, I guess, of your early hockey fandom, we'll talk about, number one, your favorite players in the history of the Sabres, and then we'll get into how much of the 99 Cup final do you remember, and how painful was it?
I'll start with the 99 final. The funny thing is, I really don't remember it, but the one thing I do remember is I was sleeping in my grandmother's bed, and I remember turning over, and I was like, "Did we win?" And she goes, "No, we lost in overtime to a controversial goal." And being a 9-year-old little boy, I was like, "What the fuck does controversial mean?" Because, you know, that game was, I believe it was triple overtime.
Yeah.
And I was in bed probably in the second period. So, just like, I don't have distinct memories of the game, but I just remember waking up the next morning and turning to my grandma. I'm like, "Did we win?" And she just turned over and she's like, "Nope." And that's kind of how my fandom as a Sabres fan has went, is nope. And I'd say favorite Sabres players. Number 1, Jean-Luc Grandpierre. Okay, I'll be serious. Number 1 is probably Hasek. I believe Ryan Miller would be number 2. I'm just super shocked he's still in the league 2 for 1.
Well, I'll say this about the top 2. What does it say about the history of the Sabres that your favorite players are the goaltenders that struggled so hard to keep those teams competitive? I mean, I guess that speaks a lot to the history of the Sabres.
Well, I've also, when I've grown older, I've kind of come to respect McGillney, looking back on how freakish he was in like the early 90s, especially like 92, 93, just scoring 76 bombs, just getting away from Russia whenever he could. Just, how could you not relate to that guy? Thomas Vanek, I would say, is up there. Like, the one year he was just absolutely carrying the team on his back, and that was the first year we didn't make the playoffs, and then we trade him to the Islanders for Matt Molson. Great trade.
Ooh.
So overall, though, right? Like, looking at the history of this team, obviously being, I mean, like you said, around 9 years old in 99, right? Like, there's only, I guess, so much enjoyment you could have had from those early teams, because heading into like 99, 2000, even up to about like 2001, 2002, that team was fairly competitive and doing quite well. The 3 seasons before the lockout, they were garbage at that stage. Post lockout, they had a run between 2005, 2006, and up to 2012, where they finished no worse than 4th in their particular conference at that stage. So it's safe to say, I would guess, that probably your favorite memories as a Sabres fan would happen to come from those seasons, because obviously it's like you look at the history and, you know, throughout that run, you had the playoffs. You had 2 conference finals runs back to back post lockout, and then you start missing the playoffs. And then, you know, 2009 to 2011, 2 losses in the first round, and then nothing since. So is it safe to say, unfortunately for you, that like your favorite memories as a Sabres fan would be those first 2 years post lockout where they made it to the conference final? Because I think a lot of people forget they were 1 game away, and I hate to bring it up, but they were 1 game away from it being Edmonton and Buffalo in the 2006 Cup final. They lost to Carolina in 7 games. So is it safe to say, like, again, that unfortunately your favorite memories as a Sabres fan happen to be conference final losses?
Oh, I agree. I will say my first big Sabres memory is in 2001 when the Sabres played the Philadelphia Flyers in the first round. The first one I had was, I distinctly remember Hasek making a save on a penalty shot, and I was like, I hope this man never leaves this team. He would leave the team the next year and go to Detroit and win the Stanley Cup. But then I distinctly remember the Game 7 against the Flyers, where I believe it was 7-0. We just shithoused them. And then I remember the other memory I have of that year. I was 11, so I just kind of basically, I don't know if I was a fan, but I just kind of was watching it on TV. Stu Barnes in Game 5, overtime goal against Pittsburgh, and then we would lose the next 2 on the Darius Kasparaitis goal. after the man threw the puck, he caught the puck with his hand with 30 seconds left and threw it over the boards. If anyone has never seen that, Darius Kasparaitis, before scoring the Game 7 goal, caught the puck with his hand and threw it over the boards. Nowadays, that's a delay of game penalty. Back then, it was like, oh, it's fine. And then in overtime, the man scores on Dominik Hasek, the greatest goaltender of all time. Darius Kasparaitis, the biggest troll of the 90s, scores on Dominik Hasek in Game 7 of the second round. We would not make the playoffs until 2005, 2006, and Dominik Hasek left us. So that's that memory. Not a complete memory because... And then 05-06 season, I had no hope for that team. It was coming out of the lockout. We didn't make the playoffs for 4 or 5 years. I could tell you the exact spot when Jason Palmville scored against Ray Emery. I could tell you the exact spot where Danny Briere scored against Philly in the first round. Like, those memories will never leave me. And then after the 2 conference finals, we let Drury and Briere walk. And this team has never been the same. And there's another play I want to bring up. Game 7 against Carolina. Brian Campbell shoots the puck over the glass for delay game penalty. We are up 1 goal. We have the most depleted D-core I have ever seen. We had Rory Fitzpatrick. Not even top 6 in the AHL. So Brian Campbell shoots the puck over the net. If you see Carolina's game-tying goal that Rod Brindamore scores, the puck is in the crease, it squirts out, and Rory Fitzpatrick, his back is turned to the puck on a penalty kill. Rod Brindamore just calmly skates up to it and roofs it on Ryan Miller. I have never wanted to punch a hole in drywall before until that moment in my life. The Sabres D-core was so depleted that year. We had Rory Fitzpatrick in Game 7 on the penalty kill. As a grown man, I cried myself to sleep after that game. And then the next year we played Ottawa, Eastern Conference Finals. I'd say I didn't cry myself to sleep because it was like 4-1, and we were down 3-0. And so I didn't really cry. I was just more angry that we lost to Ray Emery again. But
after winning the President's Trophy that year,
yes,
by the way, with 53 wins in the regular season.
And that is the 2000 series against the Rangers is the last series we've won. That was 14 years ago.
Correct. So, see, this is what I was thinking was going to happen and why I wanted to set the stage, because as we just start going through the build-up, the lead-up to this season, did you notice how the pain just started to come out and he starts remembering and all the memories
I'm starting to cry already. The hot tears are on my face already. My face is warm with anger. And while I was at work today, I wish I could turn my cam on, but I filled out a little notebook full of paper of what has been terrible in the last 10 years. And it is nearly 4 pages long.
Wow. Okay, so I think that's honestly, though, a pretty good lead up, and we'll get to that. So, we kind of established the early history, the favorite players, those early memories of, hey, when the Sabres were actually good. But like you said, they have not made the playoffs since 2000 or since 2011, technically. They haven't been out of the first round since 2007. So, yes, this year is going to be, 10 years since they've last made the playoffs. So, I'm interested, I guess, in your viewpoint, what you were thinking after that kind of, if you can put yourself back there, that 2011 kind of 2012 season, because again, that was the first year where you guys started to miss the playoffs. And if you look back at that roster, right, from the previous year, they hadn't really lost anybody who was all that important. They lost, I'd say, arguably the biggest name they lost was Tim Connolly, who went to Toronto. But in that offseason, at least in terms of free agents, but in that offseason, they had made some interesting trades in that throughout that year, really, that ultimately didn't really work out all that well. The Zach Cassian, Cody Hodgson trade happened that year. But somehow it's like you look at those moves, like that year, I don't know what happened, but in 2012, I think on deadline day, they traded Paul Gaustad and
I'll tell you exactly what happened
for a first-round pick. So it's funny because you can look back from the outside perspective and with hindsight at some of those seasons now, those first 2 to 3 years after last making the playoffs. And we look back on this and we can see some moves where you say, okay, some good, some bad, but I don't think anyone could have really expected the team to be that poor, all things considered. I mean, you look at the next couple of years with Jason Pominville getting traded away, some of the other moves, like I said, that happened too. It's like you see some of these major moves, and for the most part, does it really just all kind of fall apart? In that 2013-14 season is where I think falls apart. But I'm going to let you go here. Those first couple of years after last making the playoffs, do you remember kind of the mindset and what you were thinking and potentially what you have written down in regards to those years?
First off, if I ever see Ville Leno in person, I'm just going to say it's on site because I want to punch that man square in his face. Mike Richards too, but I grew to like Mike Richards. But in that series in 2011, Ville Leno scoring that goal in Game 6, just like the most flukish goal. And then we signed that man to a monster deal, and he didn't score a goal in 76 games. I hate that. And then NHL 21, they have Billy Bano, his stupid ass clothing line. Like, I hate you. Get out of my brain. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. You didn't score a single goal, and you made $8 million that year. I hate you. And you scored a game-winning goal in Game 6, and then we got shithoused in Game 7. And we haven't been to the playoffs since. Really, Leno? If I ever see you, I hate you. I fucking hate you. There we go. And I'll tell you the exact moment that cursed this Buffalo team. Buffalo played the Boston Bruins. And Tougie, I feel like you know this moment very well. Milan Lucic had a breakaway. He fumbled it. I will give some context that Milan Lucic is my favorite hockey player. Or was my favorite hockey player. I know that's weird. I believe now my favorite hockey player is Troy Terry. I don't know if you ever see me tweet at that man every game that he scores, but Milan Lucic had a partial breakaway. He fumbled it because he is a plug. He fumbled it. It was in the corner. Brian Miller, all 5'9" and 78 pounds of him, for some reason tried to win a foot race. He did win the foot race. At about the hash marks, he clears the puck out. And for some reason, Milan Lucic absolutely freight trains him, giving Ryan Miller a concussion. And he has had neck issues from that hit, stemming his entire career. And I know the exact players that were on the ice when that happened. The two D-men were Christian Ehrhoff and Tyler Myers. And you know when your goalie gets ran over, people are like, oh, I'm going to beat the fuck out of you. You don't do that to my goalie. No one on the ice did that. Not a single player stuck up for Ryan Miller. And that is when this organization went to hell. But I will say, when Terry Pacula did buy the team, we did make the playoffs. But the trust in our team after that was never the same.
Well,
and
I will say, I will say for Sabres fans, though, right? Like, at the very least, the Bruins kind of got their just desserts for that after the Miller thing, because they ended up getting reverse swept by the Flyers. So, I mean, some vengeance for Buffalo at that stage. But, okay, so clearly some emotions regarding those final 2 years. And then, like I said, leading into 13-14 is where I feel like the wheels fell off. Because the year before, you guys traded Jason Pominville. And then 13-14 is where they blew it up. And they haven't recovered since. You already mentioned it. Molson for Vanek didn't pan out. Trading, I'm sure you remember this deal quite well, but Ryan Miller and Steve Ott to the Blues for current Bruin Yaroslav Halak, Chris Stewart, current Vegas Golden Knight William Carrier, current Columbus Blue Jacket Jack Roslovic, and a third-round pick Linus Nassen. So that didn't pan out. Trading Braden McNabb for Nick Delorier. Also included in that trade to the Kings, where they picked up McNabb, was getting the draft pick that became Eric Chernak for the Lightning. So just L's across the board. Fun fact, the Sabres traded Halak a few days later for Michael Neuwirth, just to make that even worse. Basically, you look at that 13-14 season.
Here. Can you blame them?
And they fell off a cliff at the end of that, and they haven't been back since. And obviously that leads into 14-15 and just an absolutely horrific year there, to say the least. And then 15-16.
That was the year right after they didn't draft Draisaitl. The Sam Reinhart debacle. We'll save the drafts for another segment.
I mean, you can
I could
certainly
go on about the drafting for hours.
That we could. I mean,
hours.
But Deej mentioned it, right? Like, you look back at some of those drafts, and where the hell do you even go from there? I mean, 2013 draft, you take Rasmus Ristolainen. The very next pick was Bo Horvat. There's that. You look at 2014, and like you mentioned, that was Ekblad 1, Reinhart 2, Draisaitl 3. And I like Sam Reinhart, but one of those things is not like the other. And then you get to the 2015 draft, and I said, the wheels kind of fell off after 13-14 because of the pieces that they had traded away. But by this stage, heading into this draft was where they were outright trying to tank as hard as they could to get Connor McDavid. So you mentioned the Lucic on Ryan Miller kind of being where the franchise turned. This is the point, my opinion, from the outside perspective, where the franchise never recovered, because they tried to tank for McDavid, they lost the lottery, and then treated Jack Eichel like a silver medal. And the tone around the team from that point on has never recovered. Your viewpoint on, I guess, like I said, those posts.
I just want to say one thing about that.
Go ahead.
Oops, sorry. There is a clip. We played the Arizona Coyotes. And when the Arizona Coyotes scored, it was a home game. The Arizona Coyotes scored. Everyone in the building cheered, because we were guaranteed either Jack Eichel or Connor McDavid. Everyone in the building, all the Sabres fans cheered. And that's not a great look. That's not a great look at all. And I believe that year was also the year we traded a bunch of roster players for Vander Kane, who was also on the injured reserve list and could not play. So we traded about 4 or 5 pieces for a player who was on injured reserve. So, like, we traded for Michael Neuwirth. Don't even get me started about him. Just couldn't stop a beach ball. Just that entire year was like, what are we doing? And you keep talking about trades. I don't remember the last time the Sabres have won a trade. I could say maybe the Jeff Skinner deal, but maybe the first year that was a win, because he did score 40. He has 3 goals. He has 3 goals this year. So Carolina's even better for trading him. Like, he obviously, like, they had younger players that were more talented, and on the come up. So obviously they won that. They didn't win the trade, but they didn't harm themselves. But the 14-15 year, I believe we had a 13 game losing streak, which we just surpassed by losing 14 in a row. So like, it just has not been pretty. I don't understand. Like, how have we been rebuilding for 7 years? Toronto Maple Leafs were terrible for 1 year and got Austin Matthews and made the playoffs the next year. I don't understand.
So, again, you look back, I guess just to wrap this up so we can get into the current Sabres situation. The feeling since Eichel was drafted clearly has just been no hope. This franchise is kind of screwed. To put it bluntly, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, we're screwed. Like, we're going to be forever rebuilding. No coach is going to want to come here. No players are going to want to come here. Taylor Hall, what were you thinking? Please call your agent, because he does not have your best interests in mind. And thank you for vouching for Rolf Kruger, who was quite possibly the worst coach I have ever, like, the most uninspiring human being I've ever seen. Go back in soccer or whatever you're doing. I don't care what you were doing. Take your $3.75 million for the next 2 years. Go back to Europe. I don't want to see your goofy ass face again. You're uninspiring. I'm sick of you saying the same thing after every press conference. Oh, we just need to work harder. No shit, we need to work harder. We had 4 shots on goal in then 2 periods. What do you mean? And I will say, the Sabres lost both. They lost the Evander Kane trade, and they lost both Ryan O'Reilly trades. I don't know how you lose both trades. And I wrote this down because I have to talk about it. How did the St. Louis trade not start out with either Robert Thomas or Colton Parayko? How did you lean on Tage Thompson? Baffling.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you look back at that trade. For those who don't remember, it was Ryan O'Reilly for Vladimir Sabaka, former Bruin, former Blue, obviously, former Saber, who was an okay bottom 6 option at best. You also had Patrick Berglund, who, of course, infamously said, I don't want to play in Buffalo. And he went home to Sweden. He had some other mental health issues going on, but still, like Architect said, Tage Thompson was a big part of that.
Trash.
And eventually, it was a first-round pick in the 2019 draft that became defenseman Ryan Johnson, who is still just 19 years old. He turns 20 this year. Looks decent at the University of Minnesota. We'll see what happens. And then you guys technically have a second round. Like, this trade isn't complete because there's still a second round pick in this year's draft that belongs to the Sabres or at least it did, for that deal. I don't know if that changed hands already, if they got rid of that pick. According to Cap Friendly, they did. So I'm not sure what happened to that pick that was originally acquired for Ryan O'Reilly. So we
probably drafted someone and he retired. So,
God, I need to see if I can hunt down where that particular pick went, because that is a horrible look that guys got rid of that pick. Oh my God. God, well, I tried to find this. Let me see if I can. Oh, you know where I think it went? I think it went to Vegas for Colin Miller. So I don't know how that makes you feel. But ultimately, point being, as I think Deej's face kind of sums up the situation right now, I want to get into talking about what's happened this season. But before that, because again, people might be like, oh, why are we spending this much time talking about what's happened in the past? I wanted to set the stage, right, of getting you into the right mindset to talk about this season. Because heading into this season, there was some hope and optimism about the Sabres. I'm not saying that people thought guaranteed playoff team. But the Eric Stahl for Marcus Johansson trade honestly, heading into this, I'm like, I still think Eric Stahl has some gas in the tank. I think this might not be completely awful for them. And then you factor in, obviously, the big addition of Taylor Hall and what he might be able to do. Yes, Jeff Skinner slumped last season. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, he'll probably be better. There's no way he won't be better. Little did we know. But you get the Taylor Hall acquisition. You have someone emerging like Victor Olofsson, who out of nowhere has become, I think, a legitimate top 6 option. You could argue maybe he'd be better suited as a third line on a different team. You still have the optimism of Jack Eichel's only going to get better. Rasmus Dahlin's 20 years old. He should only get better. Like it's lost at this point that there was hope and optimism surrounding the Sabres. So we got asked this by Diet Coco on Twitter. How surprised are you now, almost into April of 2021, that the Sabres are this bad after that offseason that they had? And again, just how devastating is it to be like, hey, we might have some hope here. And now you could argue, and I'm intrigued at your opinion here too, that this is the worst it's been, despite the fact that 6 years ago you were actively tanking for Jack Eichel or Connor McDavid.
Going into this year, I had no faith in Ralph Kruger. He's basically, his 1 year of coaching experience was the Edmonton Oilers, and it was also a shortened season, and they didn't make the playoffs. I didn't like him last year. I just think he preaches. I know he did coach the Team Europe in the World Cup, or whatever it was called, World Cup of Hockey. And they made it to the finals, but that's a team full of veterans, and they had Zdeno Chara. Like, he's coming to this team with 0 playoff experience besides Taylor Hall's 16 playoff appearances. I just had no faith in this man, and I feel like we needed a coach that would put his foot down and be like, we have to play hard every game. And he's just the most lackadaisical human being I've ever experienced. Oh, we just need to play harder next game. Oh, well, if we just keep going, dude, it's a shortened season. We do not have time for this. And I was super excited when we signed Taylor Hall. I thought him and Jack would tear it up, but I believe Jack broke one of his ribs before the season started, and then you could just tell Jack something was just off. He's not using his power move to get to the net. He's not using his hands. He was basically close to still point a game, but that's just a credit to how good he is. But you could just tell the entire season something was off. And Jeff Skinner has just basically fallen off the cliff. He just cannot score. Even though the last few games he's actually looked somewhat decent. But I just even the D, there's good names on the D core, Yoki Haru, a solid D man. Colin Miller, a solid D man. It's just baffling. Our goalies cannot stop a puck. We can't score. It makes no sense why we are so bad.
So obviously you've mentioned it now a couple of times, where obviously Ralph Kruger being fired after 12 straight losses, it has now moved on to what'd you say it is now, 14 at this stage?
14.
Which ties the franchise record set by the 14-15 Sabers, who also lost 14 in a row. So I said a few minutes ago that it feels like it's worse now than it was then. At the very least, it's just as bad, which I would argue makes it worse because you're not supposed to still be this bad without that bit of success in between. But when it comes to Ralph Kruger, I look at it like this, and this was from Pierre Lebrun, who, talked to Kruger about, and he mentioned, I loved every minute of being in Buffalo. What an amazing game hockey is. On to new adventures with more wisdom in the bag. Ralph Kruger as an NHL head coach.
Sounds like Dumbledore.
No. Ralph Kruger as an assistant coach, to be able to play good cop,
sure.
Bad cop, I think could work. But I think at this stage we kind of know Ralph Kruger as the guy in charge just isn't going to work. And it's at the point now too, though, where you have certain players not throwing the coach under the bus and throwing their own teammates under the bus. This is from Ted Goldberg about Rasmus Ristolainen on Kruger's firing, saying, I've seen so many head coaches and GM changes. I feel it's more about the players, but you can't fire players. Your take on that as a fan of the team, that you see GMs go, you see coaches go, nothing changes, and now you have someone who's been there essentially this entire time through this rebuild process, and Ristolainen basically saying, well, what else could it be at this stage? Like, you have to look at everybody. It's everyone's fault. Like, does that instill you with any sort of confidence, or is that just another punch to the gut?
I just want to say, I still have hopes for Ristolainen. I've always liked Risto, but the man is a minus 160 in his time with the Buffalo Sabres. That is just baffling. Like, every year he leads the league in worst plus minus. I know plus minus isn't the stat anymore, but when you're minus 160, you have no reason to talk. You are literally part of the problem. And I like how he, like, if I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you have seen that Matt Barzal goal. Risto, what are you doing? What in the world are you doing? That is Matt Barzal. Quite possibly not, if not the second fastest player in the league. One of the most skilled players in the league. You are not gonna, like, I don't even know what he tried to do. What are you doing? Like, come on. And then he has the gall to come out and say these things, like, you are not helping. And once his contract is over, I'm sure he does not, I believe he's like 5.75, $6 million range.
5.4 through next season.
There's no way. Like, he will, like, he is a right shot D-man, so I'm sure he'll have some interests. I'm sure he'll go to Toronto or Montreal and just be a friggin' stud like all our players are, but it's just, I understand where he's coming from, but he has not been the shining light that he should have been when he was drafted.
So, looking at some of the other things that have happened here, and Deej, feel free to interject if you have anything else to add here.
But I was just going to say, Ristolainen is one of those players where, like, if you look at him on paper, he's awesome. And I just think injuries over the years have been the problem, because, like, when you get guys with size like that, like, obviously they should be able to dominate their little section of the ice, and just routinely he gets burnt. And I think he's just so tall. He's just too far away from the puck.
I will say, when he plays his, like, physical style, like, he will have a lot of hits. Like, he will go in the corner and hit. But if it's on a rush, like, it's over. Like, there's just, like, I don't know, like, he tries to hit, or if he's just given up, but it's like, dude, you can't fly at players with more skill. They're just going to go around you and between the legs score on our goalie.
So, as well with Buffalo at this stage, it keeps going from bad to worse. There were 2 instances of trash talking in the past week, and I want to know your opinion on both and which one hurt more. You have Nathan Bastian, of all people, trash talking Jeff Skinner when they're both in the box, calling him the most overpaid player in the league. And then on the New England Sports Network broadcast, you had one Jack Edwards outright call the Buffalo Sabres a dumpster fire on an NHL broadcast. Your thoughts?
First, like to say, the Sabres have 6 wins this year, and we've beat New Jersey 3 of them. So if you take those out, we have 3 wins. So if I was Nathan Bastian, I'd be like, you beat us 3 times. You'd have 3 wins. And I think that would have been more effect. But you can't be a 4th-line grinder in the NHL chirping a top 6 forward who makes $9 million, and you're probably going to make league minimum your entire career. I mean,
let's go back to top 6 forward. I think we need to address the definition there.
When you're paid as a top 6 forward.
I think that's the issue here. is like Bastion didn't look like an idiot after this. And I think that's what shocks me the most is like any other fourth line grinder that's like, oh yeah, it's like you're the most overpaid player in the league. It's like obviously it's like I have to valet my car everywhere I go. It's like that kind of situation. But like Bastion wasn't entirely off base here. And I think maybe Skinner's taken it to heart because he scored another goal, which is like really sad to say. He got one more in there in the back of the net. But like, you know, that's cute. That's a huge deal for Skinner at this point. So I don't know. I think it's weird because Bastion didn't come off entirely as an idiot.
I mean, Nathan Bastion.
I love that type of trash talk, though. That type of trash talk is like, I mean, it's all in good fun. And I thought it was hilarious. Like, if that lights a fire under Skinner's ass, can everyone just talk trash to him? Because like he has scored in the last couple games.
I mean, getting trash talked by a PK specialist, if that's what you need to kind of, you know, fire you up a little bit, then hey, that's what you got. But it's funny though with Jeff Skinner, right? Where it's just there's just been a lot of bad luck this season. To be honest,
I will also say he's not even the most overpaid person on our team. I believe that goes to Kyle Poso, who is on the fourth line and kills penalties, and I love the guy, nice guy, great person, but after his concussion problems, he is just not anything close to what he is. And I believe Jeff Skinner could turn it around, but I don't believe Kyle Poso can be anything close to what we got for him.
It's sad too if you look at like Okposo's advanced metrics.
Great human being, great person. When we first got him, he was actually super solid, but his concussion problems, and they're scary ones too. Like he said, nobody even hit him or anything in practice. He's like, I gotta go sit down, and that's like the most scary thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, dude, you're like, you could go on LTIR and just play out the rest of your career and not have to take these hits. And like, he has one goal this year, and it was a wrist shot from, I believe it was in the Bruins game. It's just on the PK, it was a wrist shot from like the blue line, and it went off someone and in. Like,
so speaking of the Bruins, then the Jack Edwards comment. I want both of your opinions on Jack Edwards at this stage. Texky, what do you think?
I thought it was funny. It's so well deserved, and like I can't believe, like, can you imagine this team on ESPN? Like, ESPN will never touch us with a 20-foot pole. Like, we will never see a national televised game on ESPN
unless you get an outdoor game against Chicago, because they need at least one a year.
Yeah, we could play in downtown Buffalo. Play whatever, Coca-Cola Field or whatever it's called now.
I mean, we're talking about Jack Edwards here. He's the legendary voice of the 1996 X Games. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's from Connecticut, so it's really shocking to me that he's even seen a dumpster.
He's definitely Connecticut blue blood, so
I don't know. I'm glad he said so. Like, the Sabers are really, really, really bad. And I feel like dumpster fire is an overused term, especially like a lot of the times, like dumpsters, like it's not that gross. It's mostly just recycling. Like that fire is not going to burn very long. But in the case of Buffalo, I feel like it's really bad. Like, and I feel like this team right now could lose to the 1992 Trinidad and Tobago team from the Mighty Ducks. Like, that's how bad Buffalo is right now. And even just as a joke, if you think about it, you're like, well, I could see them not showing up and it going wrong. Like, maybe the kids will win. Like, I don't know. Like, Buffalo's so bad that one of my favorite things to do when I'm having a bad day is look at Ralph Kruger interviews after the Taylor Hall signing.
He had a twinkle in his eye, and I don't understand why, because he just led this team into a path of destruction. And I could put this team up, I believe it's the 74-75 Washington Capitals that were like historically bad, or 1992-93 Ottawa Senators, and we'd probably lose 3-2 in a shootout.
So with that, then, before we move on to different topics, because we have covered the Sabres quite a bit, we were asked by a couple of people, C Park in 2009, Jacob Wozniak 2 on Twitter, what would you like the Sabres, what do they do next? What would you like to see them do? And another factor in this for this season now is Carter Hutton just went down to injury, which in theory sounds great, but Allmark is already out. You guys just traded Jonas Johansson to Colorado, even if he wasn't great. So looking at cap friendly, who's it going to be in goal? Do you have Dustin Tokarski, Michael Hauser, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who I think is on loan, so you couldn't even do it.
If they bring up UPL, I will riot. If they bring up UPL, I will riot.
I don't think they can, in fairness.
That man is our savior.
So,
is
for
he
this
still,
season,
is he in AHL right now?
I'm actually not sure. I can check really quickly. But for this season, what do you want them to do? What do you think they'll do? And then same question here for the next couple of seasons.
I don't even know where to start. Like, Jeff Skinner's contract is basically untouchable unless you give up picks. Kyle Poso, he's on the hook for a few more years. He's basically untouchable. Risto, like, who's going to want that contract for one more year? He's just abysmal. And, like, Dylan Cousins, I say the three untouchable players right now are Dahlin, Eichel, and Cousins. Everyone else could go. I don't even know. Like, if you get an offer on Eichel that you can't refuse, that is just going to be historically good in your favor, I would honestly take it. But who's going to offer that? Like, who can offer that? Like the Rangers? Like,
well, I was going to bring this up when we talked about the Rangers later on, because last night at Madison Square Garden, there were "We Want Eichel" chants, and obviously the Rangers have been, rumored to be in the mix here now. According to Renard Lavoie, the Sabres would be looking for, quote, 4 first-round picks or players that were first-round picks.
oh, I heard that one.
Yeah, shout out to that motorcycle. That man is pumped. He is excited.
he
So
came
is
back.
that guy.
It's a whole biker gang.
Deej is just, as an
They're
audio
on their way to
engineer,
the
he's just
mailbox.
he's just like this. The one
Going to get
universal
my mail.
mailbox of Maine. To reiterate, the Sabres are apparently looking for 4 first-round picks or players that were first-round picks if they would trade Eichel. Now, obviously, you have teams like Edmonton memeing like, oh, well, we have Kyle Turris and Zach Cassian. Here you go. But obviously, the asking price for Jack Eichel is incredibly high. So, I mean, you look at a team like the Rangers. I'm surprised, to be honest, that someone like Detroit isn't getting thrown around a lot more. They have the cap room. Detroit could take Jeff Skinner and Jack Eichel and be perfectly fine. Still have some prospects to give up in the deal to make that happen, to the point where the Sabres would have to take it. I mean, you could sit here, and we're not going to do it, but you could look at so many teams that could take Jack Eichel. At the end of the day, do you think Jack Eichel gets traded?
I just believe the price would be way too high. I mean, the Rangers could pay it. They have all the prospects. But if that deal doesn't start with Lafreniere and Adam Fox and some firsts, I'm not taking it if I'm Buffalo. The memory of the Ryan O'Reilly trade is still fresh in my brain. And we traded for Vladimir Sobotka and Patrick Berglund and Tage Thompson, who's still on the team, and he sucks. And like if you get a trade that is so historically good in your favor, you obviously take it. But there's no way. Like, people after the other NHL teams, after seeing you get absolutely fleeced in the Ryan O'Reilly trade, they're just gonna lowball you. Every team is gonna lowball you. So you right now you don't. If you're the Sabres, you do not make a trade.
So last 2 things here related to the Sabres then. Any hope and optimism on your part right now for the next 5 years?
Oh, does Connor McDavid have a brother, or
David McDavid?
Or Austin Matthews, or Matthew Matthews?
And to wrap this up then, this is from Dark Void on Discord. Would you ever consider changing the team that you support?
Well, every playoff I have to root for a different team, so I probably wouldn't. So for this year, I've already picked my teams. I'm going to root for Colorado and who was the other team? I don't know. I got Colorado. I'm a Colorado fan.
So with that, Deej, unless you have anything else to add, I think we can move on from our Buffalo section of this podcast.
I want to end this segment with a quote. And this comes from Ralph Kruger in October of this last year. And this is him on the upcoming Buffalo season. He says, "I have no fear in this at all because I know Taylor Hall."
He should have had a little fear.
So with that, let's move on to a couple other topics that we had really quick here in terms of kind of headlines before talking about the old general hockey talk section and such. Wanted to mention this. It actually has to do with Buffalo a little bit with Taylor Hall getting injured. I guess in general, we'll call it the state of NHL officiating, which Deej and I have talked about on the podcast. Again, we don't give too much spotlight to this because, yeah, the state of officiating in the NHL is completely wrong. It's screwed. Let's be honest. The lack of consistency, the lack of actually enforcing rules to the point where, and this is from Sarah Sivian, Rod Brindamore was asked about, I guess, the state of officiating, and he's advocating for refs to be, above ice level, watching video, saying our sport's too hard to referee live. You'll see refs in the box in 20 years, like if we're lucky, basically. And the big conversation I'd say over the past week, you had the two major incidents: PK Subban cross-checking Taylor Hall, who ends up getting hit in the head the same day, if not the day after. Unfortunately, again, a 19-year-old player passes away after getting hit in the head with a puck, as fluky as that might have been. I think you look at the state of officiating, and the biggest issue has to be, more so than offsides, more so than reviews, cross-checking, running rampant, not being called to the point where I don't know why cross-checking is necessarily a rule. I was going to say unless you cross-check someone in the head, but Brad Marchand was cross-checking Ty Smith in the back of the head, and there was no call on that either. I don't know. Just Deej, especially though, on this one at least, your opinion on because you've had some interesting takes in relations, I think, to the physical side of the game in the past on this podcast. Cross-checking as it stands, not being called essentially whatsoever. Your opinion?
It's weird, right? And so one of the reasons that I feel cross-checking as a call has diminished, because there was a time where cross-checking was one of the most called penalties, especially in the late 90s. That was the illegal check of the year. I think one of the reasons that you see cross-checks not being called as much as they used to be is when you hear from players that have had concussion history, the ones that find their game, one of the things they do, and it's almost universal if you read the interviews, is they learn to use their stick to help absorb hits, right? That is how you counter the force. You're using your stick to get in between you and the guy, so that way you're not suffering the whiplash. You can actually kind of add some resistance as the person on the way in. And so I think maybe, and this is completely theoretical on my behalf and speculation, but I think one of the reasons is that we're seeing cross-checks called less is referees understand that guys are now using their sticks to absorb hits. So it's difficult to see from the angle, if you're a referee, you're watching the puck, you're watching four players at once. I think just because you see the cross of a stick on somebody, it's difficult to say that that person was making a cross-check or were they protecting themselves. And I know obviously the direction of force has a lot to do with that, but I think that's part of the reason we're seeing it called less.
So I think in general, and Texie, I want your opinion on that too, but I think in general, it just comes down to the point of the lack of consistency, maybe updating certain rules, and just a general explanation from the league about what's going on due to what we've seen in the past versus what the game's kind of evolving into. to actually get your thoughts, I guess, in general about officiating, but more specifically cross-checking before we get to another example that caused a little bit of controversy in the past week.
Yeah, I've never really understood, like, certain times it's a penalty, certain times it's not. Like, it should be like a tripping call where it's just out in the open. Like, and another thing I do want to say is, you kind of brought it up with the officials being in the box. Why is there 4 additional people on the ice? Like, the players are bigger, equipment's bigger. There is no room in the offensive zone for another person half the time. And you always see these players, like, either the puck will hit a linesman or hit a referee. There is not enough room on the ice for 4 additional people. It's actually insane to me. Like they're gonna have to go upstairs or in the box, because, like, when you're trying to cycle down low, you're gonna run into the referee. Like, he has to see the goal line, and half the time, like, he is just in the way, constantly in the way. And I will say, the cross checking, if I feel like if they made it a major or something, like, teams would get the hint. But, like, cross checking a dude in the back, it hurts. Like, I believe me, it hurts. Like, and it's just like, people, like, the teams, like, especially Brad Marchand. Brad Marchand is constantly poking and prodding with his stick, being the rat he is, and it's just like, he never gets called for it unless it's in the face. And he's a short guy, so it's usually not in the face. So the gray area on that penalty, I don't know. I don't even know what they could do.
So the other major incident this past week, because the Bruins can't seem to go a week without having some sort of penalty-related controversy, was their game against Pittsburgh, where Brandon Tanev skated laterally from one side of the ice to the other, essentially from the penalty box, or at least somewhere between center ice and the penalty box, all the way over to the bench on the other side. Hits Jared Tenorti, who goes down violently against the boards, and he gets called for 5 in a game. Crosby comments on it afterwards, essentially, and, paraphrasing here, but talking about the inconsistencies with officiating. That was one of those hits where, if someone wanted to argue it shouldn't have been 5, I get it. I think you could justify a charging call with the strides taken. But again, inconsistencies there. You think about Torrey Krug in the 2019 Cup final against the Blues, just going for it. Granted, he, managed to glide for a little bit, but inconsistencies there. You could certainly call boarding. But again, a lot of people, I think, with boarding calls, I don't want to say there's some confusion or that people don't understand, but it's a vague rule in a lot of circumstances, especially with how that's called. 2 minutes for charging, 2 minutes for boarding, 5 for either. That was just another one of those calls where, again, I think it's the reason why we don't talk about officiating that much on this podcast, because it's just so objective at this stage, and there's just that overall lack of consistency. But for either of you, if you have an opinion on what that hit should have been, feel free to share. But for me, I can only put my hands up in the air and just be like, I'm not surprised it was a 5. Should it have been a 5? Yes, no. I mean, it could really go either way.
Well, I don't know if you guys listen to the Spit and Chicklets podcast that came out today, but they talked about this hit in depth.
Never heard of it.
Are they number 1 in Slovenia? I don't think so.
They're number 2, probably.
Yeah. They're shit. But yeah, nobody was really quite happy with that hit being a penalty. But, like, I agree that it was charging, but it's like, you can't go across the middle of the ice with your head down. Like, you're just gonna get flambasted by, like, anyone. And the thing is, who was the hit on? I can't remember his name.
Jared Tenorti.
Jared Tenorti injured Evgeny Malkin in that game, which is kind of why everyone was pissed at him. So you injure one of the best players in the world and the second best player on their team, and then you go across the middle of the ice with your head down, like. And I will admit, he was not very close to the boards when he was hit. I feel like it was very unfortunate that he crashed on the boards, but, like, I don't know. I feel like that shouldn't have been a penalty. I mean, he did get a 5 and an injection, so I feel like that would have been enough.
I think too, in the aftermath of, you had the Tom Wilson incident the week before, and we'll talk about Tom Wilson a little bit later on. But again, it's just one of those things where I feel like, this time, why not appease those who want to have that conversation about, or want to listen to that conversation about officiating when it is just such a crapshoot. That said, a couple other things really quickly. The draft changes that Deej and I had talked about not all that long ago on this very show are now official. This is from Pierre Lebrun. So we have a new change to the draft lottery system. Again, for those who do not remember, the number of lottery draws have been reduced from 3 to 2. So the last place team can't draft any lower than 3rd overall, as opposed to the likes of the Detroit Red Wings, who ended up picking 4th last year. The maximum move up for a lottery winner is limited to 10 spots. So, for example, I believe when New Jersey won the Nico Hischier pick, they were beyond that. I think they were 12th or 13th. So, and Dallas, I think when they got Miro Heiskanen, moved up about that far. So that's not going to happen anymore. And no team can win the lottery more than twice in a 5-year period, also known as the Edmonton Oilers rule. So, I still have the same opinions that I did, Deej, when we first had this bit of news break. I'm all in favor of this. And, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to essentially reward the bad teams for being garbage. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things, right, where you can debate the merits of tanking if you want to, and whether or not it pays off or not. At the end of the day, it comes down to the teams making the right picks no matter where they are. And hey, slam dunk picks don't always work out either. So, and even then, you talk about this upcoming draft, and it's been talked about quite a bit. In terms of the hype level, it's not quite there. You talk about, who's going to be, is Owen Power going to be the guy? Is it going to be a forward? Like, there isn't that clear-cut number 1 pick. So even tanking in a year like this, there's no guarantees. It could work out. You could end up with the next Yakupov. Who's to say? So all in all, for me, DH, Texie, I'm good with these rule changes. And I mean, I'm sure they'll affect the Bruins sooner rather than later. Once that core, continues to get up there in age.
I don't know. I think the rule changes are fine, and I think they're really trying not to fuck Buffalo twice. Seems like the impetus behind this.
I'm glad we'll be picking 3rd instead of 4th, so we'll be moving up in the world.
With that, one other talking point before we get into that general talk. Obviously, the Seattle expansion being talked about a lot at this stage, and we were asked by a lot of people heading into today's show, like, who'd you take in that expansion draft? Let's wait until we're closer to the expansion draft, maybe even the day before or so, once we know who's being protected and who isn't, because otherwise it's just too far out there. But I saw this stat, and Deej and I have had this talk as well, in terms of my opinion on the expansion draft and the rules that are being allowed. Despite having played 283 more games, the Columbus Blue Jackets currently have 20 less wins than Martin Brodeur has in his career. The Blue Jackets as a franchise have 671 wins. Brodeur had 691 in his career. This is the reason why, again, if you complain about the rules that Vegas had coming into the league and the rules that the Kraken have coming into the league, you're an idiot. Because I've said this so many times. It is a miracle that Nashville survived, that Columbus survived. Minnesota surviving, not as surprising. It's Minnesota. Atlanta didn't survive. Now, granted, ownership reasons for that, mismanagement, it is what it is. But we've talked about it before on the show, whether it be when Deke was on talking about the Coyotes, and of course, Deej is a Panthers fan. If a team sucks, people aren't going to show up. Architect knows that as well right now as a Sabers fan. You need to give these teams a fighting chance. And needless to say, the Nashville Predators, when they started, didn't really have a fighting chance. Columbus didn't really have a fighting chance, nor did Atlanta. Granted, Atlanta squandered Ilya Kovalchuk. Columbus sort of made more out of Rick Nash, at least. you need a team like Seattle to have a fighting chance. Now, whether or not other teams screw up and give Seattle an even better fighting chance, like teams gave Vegas, who knows? But a stat like this really jumps out to me as here is why those rules are different now, because what owner wants to have, no offense, but a Buffalo level team entering the league? Who the hell is going to want to watch that? Nobody. So just a stat that jumped out to me. Don't know if you two have any thoughts on that.
So not to be like Mr. Bah Humbug, right? But I look at this stat of Columbus and how they played 283 more games, have 20 less wins than Martin Brodeur. I feel like that's a false equivalency, right? Because if you're comparing the franchise to a player, of course Martin Brodeur has more wins. I mean, it's something like it's less than 10. What is it? It's less than 15% of the total amount of games played difference. But of course, Martin Brodeur has more wins. All the teams Martin Brodeur was on had Martin Brodeur. You know what I'm saying? Like there was a never-ending change of goalies in Columbus. And I think it's very difficult to make that comparison because of that stat. That said, those early 2000s teams, and I'll even go as far as to say the early 90s teams, they sucked. And you had third liners that were not good third liners expected to like show up and be stars. And I think because of the way hockey's marketed now, nobody's going to show up to a Seattle game if there's not a jersey they can buy.
Ristolainen.
And so, yeah, Ristolainen. So I don't know. I think for sure it's set up so they get at least one marquee popular player. I think that's what you need.
I don't disagree that it's not the best comparison in the world. It is just something that kind of makes you think a little bit. But yeah, I mean, talking about those Blue Jackets teams, obviously, like again, your leading name was Jeff Sanderson at that point. Which Jeff Sanderson, great player.
Jeff.
But then you look at who was around him at that time too, and the fact
David
that
Vaborny.
Yeah, David Vaborny, like Mike Sillinger, Ray Whitney. It's like you mentioned, Deej, like these are the guys where it's like, okay, if you have them next to if you look at Colorado, like if you have Jeff Sanderson, David Vaborny, Mike Sillinger, Ray Whitney, but in front of them is Forsberg, Sakic, yeah, you're probably going to win a cup. When those guys are supposed to be your Forsbergs and your Sakics, you're really going to struggle. So that was just something else that came out. I'm like, yeah, all right. Yeah, I can see what we're going for here. But I have still continued to see a lot of people complaining about the advantage Seattle has, which to me is just a bit of a farce. But the two other quick points, wanted to shout out 15-year-old Connor Bedard, who is scheduled for the 2023 draft. So Texky got plenty of time to think of a creative hashtag for the Sabres to tank for Bedard. But he has begun his WHL career with 9 points in 5 games as a 15-year-old, which is ridiculous. And a quick shout out as well to the Virginia Tech women's hockey team, who were founded this past October, and they just won their conference title. So that is a ridiculous story, an underrated story that unfortunately won't really get coverage anywhere. But still, I mean, one of the players made a post on Our Hockey talking about, some of these girls didn't even really know how to skate all that well. And, they went on to do a pretty incredible thing. So again,
I heard they scrimmaged the Sabers and won 4-2.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me. Any other talking points, boys, before we get to our favorite section of every podcast, general hockey talk?
The GHT.
I did want to mention, I don't know if you guys saw in the local Buffalo paper, the Seattle Kraken were power ranked higher than the Buffalo Sabres.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, we mentioned that before, and I can't say they're wrong to do so. I mean, honestly, the Kraken are in a better spot than some teams in general, not just Buffalo.
I think I'm going to be a crackhead.
There you go.
I'm going to be a Seattle Kraken fan. I'm moving west.
There you go. I mean, hey, I'll take Seattle weather over Buffalo weather. Deej, direct us, sir. Direct us. What division are we going to first?
Oh, I'm going to use the bathroom real quick, and then we're going to go to a division.
The bathroom division, also known as the Mass Mutual East.
Mutual East.
Can I say something funny while Deej is gone?
Oh, sure. We'll see if we keep it.
I wrote this down at work today. This episode of Tougies Take Podcast, powered by Deej Audio, is brought to you by Florida Oranges. Florida Oranges, the only thing in Florida that's not trying to kill you.
Is that true, though? Not the sponsorship, but I don't know. I feel like I could Google Florida Orange Death, and something would come up. I mean, literally, the autofill is Florida Orange Disease. So, the bacterium causes one of the most devastating citrus diseases called greening. So, I don't know. I don't know if I want that sponsorship. If I type in Florida Orange Death. Okay, maybe that's not what I want because there's Orange County. All right. Well, hey, what are you going to do? It led me right to Florida man headlines.
That better make it in.
Yeah, I think it has to. I think it has to now.
So I'm thinking about which division we should cover first. And you know what I think we should do? Tougie and I have a bit of an announcement to make. And I think it's going to go into which division we should cover, but I don't know, it's kind of big, so it's weird talking about it on our podcast, but Tougie and I are adopting. We've decided that since we kind of like focus not too much, but we've got more of an emotional investment in the Central and East divisions, that each of us should adopt a team from the other divisions. I won't spoil Tougies, but he has chosen a team from the West Division.
Mm-hmm.
And I have chosen a team from the North Division.
Yes.
And
exciting.
I know that this absolute turn is going to shock a lot of you at home. But the team I have chosen, I went with the best team in Canada. And I know I've talked a lot of shit about them this year, but I am officially an Edmonton Oilers fan.
That's just a cop-out.
Congratulations. God.
So that said, for me, that's my favorite story of this last week is the Edmonton Oilers. So why don't we start with the North Division? I'll let you do a little rundown.
North. The Scosh. People call it the Scosh.
Well, I'm sure they do.
Yeah. Let's start off then with your new favorite team, the Edmonton Oilers, which I will say, you look at the past week, and obviously there's been some COVID trouble throughout the league, unfortunately. But Edmonton, prior to their game last night on Monday against Montreal getting postponed, had won 3 in a row. They beat Calgary 7-3, Winnipeg 2-1, and Winnipeg 4-2. And there's no real other way to put it aside from just Connor McDavid is absolutely insane. And this particular stat comes from Elliot Friedman from 31 Thoughts. And again, it's nuts to think about. Connor McDavid leads teammate Leon Draisaitl by 7 assists and has now tied Austin Matthews for being number 1 in goal scoring around the league. The last player to outright lead the NHL in both goals and assists was Wayne Gretzky in 86-87, and Gretzky had done it 5 times in 6 seasons. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you run out of, superlatives and descriptors for Connor McDavid at this stage in terms of just what he's capable of doing.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if you saw this last night. Obviously, it's Tuesday the 23rd that we're recording this, but late last night on the R Hockey subreddit, Somebody uploaded the advanced metrics for Connor McDavid's defensive stats for every year prior to this one, and then the metrics for this year. Connor McDavid was a major defensive liability every year up into this year. He was just that good at offense that he didn't need to play defense. This year, he has middle of the road average defensive statistics. And it's completely turned the team around. Isn't it like the guy just needed to play 15 seconds of defense a game, and it's completely changed the team. And I think that just speaks to how good of a player Connor McDavid is, when they were talking about how he has now entered that phase of his game where he is no longer just this really talented offensive player, but now he is a dominant 200 feet of ice player, which is, and this was the comparison and the general gist of this Reddit post, was that was the shift that Sidney Crosby needed to make before he started winning cups. That was the shift that Patrice Bergeron made, or rather Marchand needed to make before he became elite. Like, that was the shift Patrick Kane needed to make to become an elite player. And so you're looking at Connor McDavid is now no longer this once in a generation offensive talent. But I think at the end of this year, I think we will be able to say without a doubt that Sidney Crosby has lost his throne.
I mean, Texie, your thoughts as, again, we've talked about it, as a Sabres fan who missed out on this player.
I just wanted to say one stat. Connor McDavid has 60 points. The Buffalo Sabres have scored 64 goals as a team.
So Sabres are winning.
Yeah. Suck it, McDavid. Suck it.
Who needs him? Aside from that, I mean, obviously, Draisaitl's still insane, too. Tyson Barrie as well. I mean, still not great defensively, but for an offensive defenseman who can put up points, I mean, it's funny, the comparison's been made to Paul Coffey already, in that Tyson Barrie, when insulated by, some star players like he was in Colorado, like he was in Edmonton, granted, Toronto didn't really work out, but Tyson Barrie, when allowed to be Tyson Barrie, he's always going to be a defensive liability, but he's still someone who's capable of putting up those points. Underrated as well, Jesse Puljujarvi turning into a really good two-way player. He doesn't exactly have the points to kind of back up, calling him like an emerging star at 13 points in 33 games. But if you look at some of those defensive metrics as well, he's been great. So I think Deej has adopted a winning team here, all things considered, and somehow, some way, Mike Smith still has a plus 920 save percentage.
God, that's so weird. I don't like to think about it. It's one of those facts where, like, it's not a bad fact, but if you think about it, it's like, well, that's going to take up my night.
I think I'm most impressed with Darnell Nurse, though. Like,
oh yeah,
he's
so that's
absolutely
I wanted to talk
freakish
about Nurse. So not only is Nurse freakish, but Barry's freakish. And so when I look at this, there is something that exists in the NHL. It does not get talked about because it's not that common of an occurrence as much as we all want it to be. But magic defensive pairings, where you have two pretty good defensemen that when paired together just become insane. Or you can have one really good defenseman and you pair them with the right bad defenseman and they become insane. So some examples of this, the year LA won the cup, Jack Johnson and Drew Doughty as a pairing. When the Rangers had Keith Yandel, they paired him with Dylan McIlrath, and it was like the best defensive pairing in the league. So there's these magic defense pairings that you see once every couple of years, and I think Edmonton's found one with Darnell Nurse and Tyson Barrie.
Which is weird, though, because neither of them play defense. Like, Darnell Nurse has that reputation as being this, like, well-rounded defenseman, but if you look at some of those defensive metrics, it doesn't paint a pretty picture at any point over the last 3 years. But then you get to the offensive side of his game, which has only gotten better over the last 3 years. So it's interesting how, I guess, player reputations can kind of play out like that. But yeah, I mean, at this stage, obviously Edmonton able to kind of, shrug off what was a pretty concerning start where, the questions were legitimately being asked, like, is this team going to miss the playoffs? But for now, things are looking pretty good. We'll jump to the top of the division for the hell of it. Let's go with Toronto next. We won't lead on, Maple Leafs fans this time out. It was a pretty rough week.
It's been a rough week for them.
For the Leafs. It's been a rough kind of month at this stage for Leafs fans, all things considered. I mean, only 2 games in the past week, a 1-1 split with Calgary. But the goaltending issues are still there. You have Chris Johnston from Sportsnet quoting Kyle Dubas saying that he is willing to trade a top prospect to make something happen. You lose Jimmy Vesey and Travis Boyd on waivers, which, whatever, you have the depth for that reason. But it's one of those stages now, one of those points where, heading into this, I think you still might have had the questions about them defensively. But now, obviously, more than anything else, it's the goaltending concerns at this stage. It's the health of Freddie Anderson and the continued struggles of Freddie Anderson. It's the health of Jack Campbell, who's 4-0 on the season with a .965 save percentage, but that's the point. He's only played 4 games. And Michael Hutchinson started off really strong, but obviously in his last 2 starts has looked a little bit more like Michael Hutchinson recently. So the idea of going after...
Hutch is going to hutch.
The idea of going after maybe another defenseman or another top 6 forward, it might have to take a back seat to the idea of doing something crazy with the goaltending, just because Freddie Anderson's obviously out of Toronto at the end of this season, but it's still a team that is in first place in this division. You can't say comfortably. They're only 2 points ahead of Winnipeg at this stage. But, maybe a few
and the
more
Oilers
issues
are
than we
coming
thought.
on strong.
I don't know if you would have thought smooth sailing, though, But the struggles are still there. Maybe a little bit more than what we thought and in different areas. So, general thoughts on the Leafs. Again, not ready to hit the panic button yet, but they're an interesting team to watch heading towards the deadline.
Yeah, it's like we've addressed this before, right? Where the Leafs inherently, just the way they're built, the way their players work, they've got a lot of momentum-based players, and they're going to be a streaky team. And for you to get those 8, 9, 10-game winning streaks that you're going to see from the Leafs, you're also going to see weeks like this last week where it seems like they can't put it together at all. So I don't know. It's just it's part of the price you pay with being a fan of this team or the way the team's constructed. And you just hope that this team catches fire when it's actually playoff time.
That's nothing from Architect. Perfectly fine.
I hate the Maple Leafs. I feel like since that Matthews injury, I feel like this team has just been they just have no identity. Like Freddie Anderson with his sub 900 goals against average, or save percentage, just if he's not gonna be able to stop the puck and Austin Matthews can't get 2 to 3 a game, their defense is not good enough to grind down low in the corners, and they're just not gonna make it in the playoffs. They may make it past their division, their conference in the playoffs, but as soon as they play Tampa Bay or Florida, this team has no chance. They're screwed.
Even I feel like Carolina is a difficult matchup with them, just the way Carolina forechecks. I think it's safe to say, and Tougie, let me know if you disagree with me here. I think it's safe to say that the top 4 teams in this North Division are locked. I don't think that's going to change over the next 21 games. I think we're looking at our playoff teams, and if you are Winnipeg right now, you really, really want to catch fire so you can, and I'm sorry, Habs fans, but you really want to play Montreal in the first round. You've got your other options are playing against Uber McDavid or a Toronto team that hasn't made it past the first round in years, and they're pissed and they want to get that reputation off their back. I don't know. I think you really want Winnipeg, even though they're doing well, you want to see them do amazing at this point. Because that first seed is that's a huge difference maker.
Yeah, I can't help but agree at this stage with the top 4 being locked in. I think obviously you talk about the struggles for Vancouver and for Calgary. Ultimately, it's going to be viewed as a very down year for both of them. But no, I agree. For the Jets, it definitely right now, if you lock it in and you end up playing Edmonton, that is, I don't know if anyone wants Edmonton in the first round there, even though they lost to Chicago last year. I don't think anyone wants Edmonton in a 7-game set. So aside from that, I mean, Texas, you mentioned hating Toronto. Unless you have anything else to add in about Winnipeg, your thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens at this stage, who currently sit in the playoff spot, are likely to stay there, and have had an interesting week themselves.
Just want to point out how much of an absolute joy it was for Nick Suzuki to get absolutely coned by JT Miller the other night. Their absolute Lord and Savior in Montreal, Nick Suzuki. Just, I mean, it is 3-on-3, but that's got to sting. That's got to sting on the heart.
So for Montreal in the past week, you lose to Winnipeg, you lose to Vancouver, both in overtime. You beat Vancouver in a shootout, so they finally won in OT, and then your game against Edmonton was postponed. There are, of course, COVID issues going on with the team, and Elliot Friedman mentioned this as well. Feels like there's a lot riding on Montreal's COVID testing results. Monday's game against Edmonton was the first Canadian division postponement of the season. Numbers are rising across the country. Vaccine rollout is aggravatingly slow. It's a bit of a miracle that every game was played until now. So I think that is an underrated aspect of this, right? This was the first game in Canada postponed. There were a couple of scares a little bit early on. So for Montreal, obviously, we don't know what the effect will be in terms of the outlook for this team, but still more of the same in a lot of ways, right? You look at Tyler Toffoli and Jeff Petrie leading this team in points with 27 apiece. Talked about Jonathan Drouin turning it around a little bit. Hey, you'd still probably want more out of the likes of Brendan Gallagher. And goaltending-wise as well. I mean, again, Carey Price still hanging in there at a .903. Certainly not where where you would want him to be at this stage. And of course, yes, you can look at 5-on-5 save percentage to feel a little bit better about that. Of course, historically low save percentage for Carey Price when his team is shorthanded this season. You can react to that how you want to. I mean, Deej, right now you look at it, it's funny. Carey Price with a .916 save percentage, even strength. Again, that shorthanded save percentage, an .817.
Yeah, they're
.817.
Yeah, that penalty kills dog shit. It's not good.
You mean it didn't immediately get better because you fired your coaches? Who would have thought? Maybe the goalie was the problem.
Oh, yeah, it turns out you just got to stand here. We looked at all the tape. That's where your coach was wrong. You guys were standing too close. Yeah, there's a lot to figure out there. I don't know. That's the thing. So with Montreal, I think if you're a Habs fan right now, you hope this team can catch fire like they did at the beginning of the season. And you really have your fingers crossed about these COVID test results because just based on how they're handling it and the exposures and how they had to cancel practice today and the sheer amount of players that were quarantined today, even though they only had 2 positive results. I mean, like, let's say Jeff Petrie is one of your guys that has to sit out for 2 weeks.
It's over for them.
Yeah, so you got your fingers crossed. Luckily, there is a bit of a moat in the castle that is Canadian playoffs before you reach our next team, which is the Calgary Flames. My God, have they been unremarkable?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the past week, you get crushed by Edmonton, you beat Toronto, you lose to Toronto, and then you lose to Ottawa, which we'll talk about the Sens and everything that's gone on with them. It's been a crazy week, but in terms of talking points for the Flames, the only thing I could have possibly added to the list was the controversy over taking the puck from Philip Gustafsson last night, which again isn't even a major talking point.
They already apologized for that. Yeah, it was a misunderstanding, apparently.
At this stage, it is kind of treading water. I mean, you talk about it with Sutter, if he's going to be able to turn the team around. I mean, they've lost 2 in a row. They have 5 wins in their last 10. I mean, I think, it's getting to that stage where I agree with you, Deej, that they're probably not going to make it. And then, like I've said before on the show, it's at the stage where a lot of these guys are playing for their spots because Daryl Sutter will be here next year. I don't know how many of these players will be back, all things considered. So Aside from Daryl Sutter and Jake Markstrom off the back of that fresh new contract, aside from that, there's going to be a lot of changes in Calgary heading into next year.
Yeah, you built a team. It was supposed to be a winner, and it just wasn't good enough. It's very much like, and this is, I mean, obviously it's not a great comparison, but it's when the Blues, before they turned it around and won the Cup that year, they were talking about, well, what do we do? Where do we send O'Reilly? Where do we send Tarasenko? It's that, only it's real.
If they didn't make the playoffs that year, absolutely Vladimir Tarasenko, maybe Ryan O'Reilly too, who's to say, but definitely Tarasenko is playing somewhere else. So, yeah, very underrated thing there. So, who knows? Maybe Calgary ends up winning the Stanley Cup this year. Crazier things have happened.
Let's talk about... So, there is a team that talk about getting kicked when you are down. So, I actually watched this game last night. Bo Horvat. It physically hurt me to watch him to attempt to skate off the ice last night as Vancouver lost their 4th of 4 starting centers. I believe now they have moved JT Miller to the top line spot because he's the only guy that could win a faceoff and play a little defense on their entire roster, which is crazy to think about. It just speaks to depth's an issue on this team. I know we don't really talk about that a lot, but it really is. But Vancouver, they got kicked when they were down. Obviously, they weren't making the playoffs this year, but now it looks like they might get the chance to win one of 6 players that have not differentiated themselves as the consensus number 1 pick.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, in terms of the injuries, Pettersson, Horvat, Sutter, Beagle, their top 4 centers, all down. And it just kind of seems to happen that way, doesn't it? Where a team is in the doldrums and then all of a sudden the injuries start to add up, and whether or not it's certain players just being like, look, it's not worth it to go through this pain this season. I'm checking out. Who's to say? But, it's like you sit there and, like I mentioned, claiming Jimmy Vesey, Travis Boyd. Obviously, that isn't going to be an answer. I mean, you mentioned JT Miller, and I get that there have been some inconsistency issues, but I saw this from Joey Kenward. Miller has hit 100 points in 100 games with the Canucks. Like, he has absolutely been a good acquisition, but at this stage, you talk about
it's easy when you're on the ice for 50 minutes a night.
Who are the guys still standing at this point on this team? And it's just a disaster. I mean, granted, you beat Ottawa and Montreal last week. You also lost to Montreal and got shit canned by Winnipeg last night. It is just the question of what the hell happens with this team. And I think the big issue, though, I'm sure you guys agree, is who the hell do you even trade? I mean, in terms of expiring deals, again, Brandon Sutter, who's hurt, you're getting nothing for him. You're not getting much for Alex Edler at this stage, I would presume. I mean, again, Edler, he's 34 years old. He's not bad, for sure. But I don't know. Like, it's tough, too. Like, what is the market on an Alex Edler at this stage? It is a team where the Jim Benning horrific contracts he's handed out. I mean, that bad mojo's come home to roost. This team is in a lot of trouble now moving forward. And it's a shame for Canucks fans because it was less than a year ago where all of a sudden it was like, maybe? And now you talk about, the injuries, a rough offseason ahead where Pettersson's going to be signed. I mean, it's a mess.
There was so much hope in this team the second Brock Besser started playing well a few years ago, and then you added to it. And then Deaky Pete, he looked amazing, and then you added to it. And suddenly, going into the season, where you looked at the emergence of Quinn Hughes and everything going on, you're like, oh my God, this team could actually this isn't a cup winning roster, but this could be very easily a playoff roster too. You're in a bad situation right now. That said, if I am a Canucks fan right now, the way I look at this is you have a lot of guys that were not going to get any ice time this year that now maybe you'll find a diamond in the rough. I think that's the only silver lining you can take from this.
It's just Thatcher Demko has been absolutely lights out, and it's like they're absolutely ruining his season because he has been so dominant the last 10-15 games. And another thing is they are absolutely screwed because they're only 2 points out, but they've played 5 more games than Montreal. So they're just going to be a victim of the schedule at this point.
So, Canucks fans, I hope you're feeling good. Maybe go outside,
Coming from a
take a
Sabres
walk.
fan.
Yeah. And to get to Ottawa then really quickly too, because again, they've had an interesting week. They only played 2 games, a 1-1 split, but my God, the goalie injuries at this stage. Now, an interesting note, 6 out of 7 teams in the North Division have been shut out at least once, apparently. It was a stat I saw. It doesn't seem possible. Like, Ottawa apparently doing a pretty good job of not getting shut out, not doing a great job of picking up wins, and unfortunately the goalie health concerns are there. They lose Joey Decord to injury as well, probably out for the season, unfortunately. So they pick up Anton Forsberg on waivers, but with him in quarantine, they are down to Philip Gustafsson, Kevin Mandolese, and Cedric Andre as the 3 goalies. Gustafsson was the only one to play an NHL game, which was last night. Of course, he got that win, and he became the first Sens goaltender to win in his first NHL start since Andrew Hammond 6 years ago. And yes, that was the Hamburglar years. So I don't think there will be as magical of a run, all things considered, for Ottawa. I just feel bad. We've mentioned it so many times on this show, how that fan base has rallied around the younger players, and then Joey Decord shows up out of nowhere, and in 8 appearances, I mean, he started off well. It did drop down to an .897 save percentage, all things considered, but one of those guys that kind of already has that Jack Campbell reputation of, like, this guy's just a great human being who's a good locker room guy, from Boston, by the way. Yeah, he gets injured and is probably out for the year. So I don't know what it is for Sens fans. You're just not allowed to have nice things, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, this is the fan base that rallied together to get Melnyk a liver. So I think this team is just, they're founded on hopes turning to ash.
I can't say anything funnier than that, so I just will not speak.
Jesus Christ.
Checkmate, Deej. Checkmate.
Architect, I'll leave it up to you. We have 3 other divisions that we want to kind of cover here before we wrap up today's show. Where are we going next?
1 second. So what team are you rooting for now, Tougie?
I've yet to announce
let's go to the Central Division.
Are we going to the Central?
You start with them.
All right.
Let's go with the big reveal.
Well, no, I'm not rooting for anyone in the Central. I'm rooting for someone in the West.
Well, you know what we mean.
Okay, so we're going to the West. Is it official? All right.
Yeah, we're going to the West. It's the fake West Division.
Can we be Colorado boys together or what?
Don't put it past the Sabres fan to ruin the fucking announcement. Way to drop the confetti before the game ends. It is official. I am hitching my wagon to the Colorado Avalanche horse, which isn't really all that much of a surprise to anybody. I think people have known that as a Bruins fan since 2000, I've had a soft spot for the Avs and have considered them my unofficial second team. Of course, when I'm at home streaming, of course, we have the 2001 Avalanche kind of team poster behind me. And so I mean, it might appear as if it's hopping on the bandwagon, but rest assured, I have been on this bandwagon for a while, and hot damn, what a time to be on this bandwagon. Shall we talk about their last 4 games? Jesus, Mary, and Hossa. 8-4 over the Ducks, 5-1 over the red-hot Minnesota Wild, 6-0 over the Wild, and then 5-1 over the Arizona Coyotes. This team, I think we knew they were going to be good. Beating Anaheim, not surprising. Beating the Coyotes, not surprising. Outscoring Minnesota 11-1 is just batshit insane. That is the only way to describe it. And obviously, you talk about the Rantanens and McKinnons and what they're doing, but is Philip Grubauer the favorite for the Vezina at this stage? I think he might have to be.
No.
It is unreal what he is doing right now, guys.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even if you look at it, what he's got a sub too. It's actually, I don't know if this still holds up, but a few days ago when I looked at the stats, he had a better goals against average than Vasilevsky.
Yeah, he does right now.
He still does.
Vasilevsky has a 1.86.
Yeah, Vasi has him on save percentage, a 933 to a 930. But as Texie mentioned, Vasi's at a 186. Grubauer's at a 171.
Vasilevsky's only lost 3 games.
Yeah, we'll talk about Andrei Vasilevsky a little bit later on for sure, because he's fucking crazy. But yeah, Grubauer, I mean, it's funny because the conversation, obviously, as you expect, for the Vezina has changed. And for a while, we're like, oh, Vasilevsky or Fleury. And now out of nowhere, Philip Grubauer's in the conversation. And a certain Carolina goalie, I mean, the certain LA Kings goalie also kind of deserve a little bit of a shout out. I mean, Nedeljkovic and Cal Peterson have both done well, but I think if you're talking right now about your 3 Vezina finalists, if the season ends today, it's Vasi, Fleury, and Grubauer, which again, you talk about the pedigree of the other 2, and then Philip Grubauer, who I think is a name that a lot of people still don't view as like this starter caliber guy, but I hate to inform people, as of today, he has 200 career games played with a 921 save percentage in his career. He is unbelievable. And I mean,
Jeez.
Colorado found their guy. A career 921. It's crazy. He's so good.
I think Washington really regrets trading him away. Like, he could have been their cornerstone for a while.
That is a tough call. I mean, I don't blame them for backing Holtby, especially in the aftermath of the Cup, but you're not wrong, right? Like, when they entered that playoff run, the Cup run, Grubauer was the starter over Holtby, but then Holtby took over. It is kind of ridiculous, though, how fast it went from Holtby's our guy to 2 years later, he's not even there. And meanwhile, Grubauer has had a 917, a 916, and now has a 930 so far this season. So I don't think you're necessarily wrong there. But I'm not complaining as a fan of a team in Washington's division.
So, some of the goals that Rantanen has scored this week have just been. He's like one of the most underappreciated players in the NHL right now, and I know a lot of people don't get to watch some of these. It's not out west, but they do play at a later time. But some of his goals, like, oh my god, like the one he knocked it out of midair at the blue line. Backhand bar down snipe, like, oh my god, like, just one of the best, like, most talented players I've ever seen. And he's a big guy, like, he's a big man and he can move. Very underappreciated on that Colorado team, and they're just flying right now. It's insane.
An absolute analytics darling there too. Deej, any other points about Colorado, my official team of the West, or do we move on to the top of the Honda West in Vegas?
Yeah, let's talk about Vegas, baby.
So
that was forced.
That was. The past week, though, I mean, you beat San Jose, you beat LA, you lose to LA, and then you beat St. Louis. So honestly, in terms of talking points for the Golden Knights, I don't have much. I don't. It just feels like it's more of the same. One of the teams that you expect to be at the top are at the top. I mean, Ryan Reeves confirms that he hates the San Jose Sharks. That's about it. I mean, Robin Leonard, I don't remember if this was this week or last week, but, having to kind of quell the rumors about where he's been, mentioning concussion issues. But aside from that, it's just been a team that is continuing to, for the most part, steamroll the competition and be at the front of that West Division.
Yeah, I mean, I did watch the rest of the Vegas St. Louis game last night after that Winnipeg Vancouver game ended, and God, the jerseys are so bad. They just get worse the more you look at them. I don't know why I brought that up, but it really upset me last night. I was like, they have no taste.
I actually like the Silver Knights jerseys, their farm team. They have like the silver helmets. Those silver helmets are actually pretty sick. But the gold helmets are just so off-putting. I don't understand.
Yeah. I've talked
It's like
about this.
mustard gold too. Like the jerseys, it's like ugh.
It's not even the good kind of mustard.
It's like honey mustard.
It's
Get
that
outta here.
fancy upper class exclusive mustard.
I can't afford that. Get out of
It's
here.
that elitist mustard.
There's
It's
a
the
joke
mustard
here
with the
about-
stuff in it.
There's a
Donald
joke
Trump
here
eats
about
that mustard.
knights in a class system, but we can move past it. But yeah, I think I don't know, the Knights fans that like the mustard jerseys or even the red reverse retro, more power to you. But
See, I don't hate the red. I hate the gold one.
I'm not a fan of either. To be fair,
All I know is this episode has been brought to you by French's, the people's mustard.
Minnesota over the past week, they beat Arizona. They got shit kicked by Colorado, and then beat the Anaheim Ducks. As my dog barks at, I think, another dog outside. I don't know if that picked up on the mic, but it is what it is. For Minnesota at this stage, the biggest talking point, aside from the fact that they got booted by Colorado, has to be the run that Kaapo Kähkönen was on. Where at one point, I don't think he is anymore. I do actually have to check the team stats, and indeed he is. I don't think on this run anymore, but at one stage was on a 9-game winning streak dating back to February 18th, and was one of only 4 rookies in history to post that type of winning streak. And honestly, the longest of the modern era at this stage. Like if you look at longest winning streaks for rookie goalies in NHL history, only 4 goalies have hit double digits, and the most recent was the longest winning streak in history, a goalie by the name of Ross Brooks for the Bruins, who I've never heard of, back in 73-74, won 12 in a row. And the other 3 all played for Montreal between 1926 and 1968, but George Hainsworth, Rogie Vachon, and Bill Durnan. So it's interesting, though. There are a lot of goalies who are tied at 9, including Jordan Bennington in 2018-19. So Kaapo Kähkönen coming to a Stanley Cup parade near you, if this is anything to go off of. I mean, this was a gift for Minnesota. Like, in terms of the prospects to look at, Kaapo Kähkönen was up there as somebody to pay attention to. I don't know if people thought he would have started off his career this hot. I mean, 22 career starts now, or games played at least with a 919. And then Cam Talbot, who was brought in to be the guy, he's now a part of a tandem, and Cam Talbot in a tandem works a lot better and is a lot more stomachable. He is a 918 at this stage. And then, of course, you talk about Kaprizov, who is still probably the favorite for the Calder, or although, as we'll talk about, in terms of some of these rookie goalies, Kähkönen's in the running, in my opinion. Kevin Lankinen, Alex Nedeljkovic, who we'll mention a little bit later on in Carolina. It's an incredibly interesting rookie class, and the Wild have 2 of the best. So I think that makes a really rough week a little bit more stomachable.
Yeah, I think so the only thing that prevents me from saying that Kähkönen will win a Calder is that he is on the same team as Kaprizov, and I don't think they would take it away from his teammate to give it to him when Kaprizov's obviously the favorite, if that makes sense.
As we have learned today, architect with little to say about the Minnesota Wild. It's funny because with you, I never know, right? Like we on a podcast with 3 people, you often go like, okay, I speak, Deej speaks, then Texie speaks, and then I take over and we move on. But there are some times, like with Toronto, you're just like, I just hate Toronto, man. Nothing to add. And with Minnesota, I'm like, okay, what's he gonna say? And you're just like, I got nothing.
I was reading stuff.
Fair enough. Shall we move on to the St. Louis Blues? Now, Deej, you mentioned in the North you think the top 4 are locked up. I think in the West, the top 4 are locked up, and it's 3 of the teams that we expected, and it's clear that Minnesota is going to be above Arizona because Arizona's completely fallen off, now well behind LA. The funny thing is, though, about St. Louis, on the season, a -7 goal differential compared to LA's +3. So who's to say? I think the top 3 are locked in for sure, but St. Louis might have to be a little bit careful. I mean, I'm not saying LA is going to catch them, but I think they could. And for the Blues, I mean, you lost to LA this past week. You did win 3 in a row, or 2 in a row after, beating San Jose twice before getting pumped by Vegas 5-1 on Monday, as we mentioned. But for the Blues, you lose another guy to injury. Oscar Sundqvist is out for the season now. It's an interesting situation, I'd say, for the Blues at this stage where it just doesn't feel like the pieces have come together. Jordan Bennington's down to a 905 on the season. And again, Ville Husso behind him on an 885. He is not an NHL backup. You talk about teams like Toronto where, we need to go out and get a goalie. St. Louis needs somebody to help take the pressure off of Jordan Bennington. I mean, again, Bennington with that fresh new contract. And again, you look at some of the numbers, Bennington, really not all that much better. I mean, again, he has, like I said, a 905. It's a 914 at even strength. So it's not like, granted, his shorthanded save percentage isn't great, but it's not like it's getting drastically pulled down like you could argue Price's is. St. Louis, these fucking motorcycles. St. Louis, injury concerns. Hopefully there's no bikers on the team
lit today.
God, it is. It's unbelievable.
Is it payday or what?
You get good weather, and these fuckers just cannot wait to be a public nuisance. It's unbelievable. Anyway, Architect, your thoughts on the St. Louis Blues? All right, good talk. Deej, your thoughts on the St. Louis Blues?
So I want to talk about there was something that happened with the Blues in the last week and a half, and that is the return of Vladimir Tarasenko. He's played 8 games now that he's back, and in those 8 games, he scored 1 goal, and he's a -6. Obviously, it was over a year between games. It's going to take him a little bit of time to get going. That said, though, I don't know if you saw this, but when Tarasenko announced that he was coming back to play, there were some sports doctors that were like, his shoulder injury history, if he gets hit wrong once, he's done for the rest of his career. It makes you wonder if Tarasenko coming back is what they were hoping it to be. And when I look at these standings and I see that they are, in fact, 5 points ahead of LA right now?
Yeah. LA with a game at hand.
LA with a game in hand. You look at the last 10 for both teams. If LA wins 1 more of those games in this last 10 games they played, this is a very different conversation we're having. And then when you go and you look at LA's schedule coming up, and that the majority of their games against the Sharks and Ducks have not happened yet, I don't think it's as locked as we might be inclined to initially say it is looking at the standings. I think LA has a real shot to unseat St. Louis if they don't capture some kind of spark.
Texky, anything else to add, or do we move directly on to LA?
So let's move on.
Fair enough. LA this week. Again, you beat St. Louis, you lose to Vegas. You beat Vegas, and then you lose to San Jose. Like a really up and down kind of week there. We talked about Kopitar and Doughty a ton. We have talked about Cal Peterson unseating Jonathan Quick really as the goalie for that team. They also re-signed Matt Roy yesterday to a new 3-year deal at $315 million per, which, my opinion, pretty damn good deal. Matt Roy, at least from an analytical standpoint, is a tremendous defenseman that is worth keeping around. And you talk about the insulation here for LA, with these older veterans next to these younger talents, they're in a really good spot moving forward. And there was some doubt over this team. But you're looking at a team now that has their first round pick this year, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, 2 fourths. This is a team that is set up to continue to do damage in terms of adding to this group with the younger players that they already have. It looks like you have the Jonathan Quick replacement, even if Quick still has 2 years left at $5.8 million after this. They're not a team that's in dire straits with cap space. They have almost $23 million in cap space, according to Cap Friendly. So for the Kings right now, it might be tough to kind of temper those expectations, but I would say, dare I say, it's worth being a little bit optimistic about what this season could bring and the next few seasons to come.
So I want to say Calvin Peterson has a .926 save percentage, and also was a Buffalo Sabres draft pick who we decided not to sign. Or I might say he did not want to play here, and I do not blame him. But he looks very promising, and I've been impressed with his game.
Deej, you got anything for the LA Kings?
Just that it's weird to look at these. I know we've occasionally glanced at player stats on bad teams over the season, and I know obviously we don't put a lot of weight into plus minus, but it's weird to see the amount of players that have a positive plus minus on this LA Kings team. And when you look at their net goals against, they're doing a pretty good job at keeping the puck out of the net. So I don't know. I don't think the Kings make it past the first round if they miraculously get in. But I think they've got a shot at getting into the playoffs. Unlike the other three teams in this division.
Yeah, I mean, talk about low talking points. We do actually have some breaking news. That is that the NHL has announced that Montreal's games have been postponed through Sunday, March 28th, of course, due to COVID issues.
God.
So I believe that affects them, Edmonton, and Ottawa in terms of who was on the schedule. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, the disruption and the effect that could have on Montreal's season. I mean, you talk about it. A team like Calgary, now's the time to turn it on. If you're ever going to catch Montreal, them having to take essentially a week off due to, COVID issues would certainly be the time. As Deej mentioned, though, the other three teams here in the Honda West, you have Arizona, which again, just fallen off at this stage, and it's honestly kind of sad. I mean, it might have been an uphill battle for the Coyotes to make the playoffs in the first place, but over the last week, you get shut out by Minnesota. You lose to Anaheim in overtime. You do come back and beat Anaheim 5-1, and then Colorado dunks your head in the toilet with a 5-1 win. The big talking point for them, aside from, talking about the health concerns for Kemper and Ranta, who both haven't been phenomenal this season. They've been okay. The big talking point has been the continued emergence of Connor Garland. But on 31 Thoughts, Elliot Friedman postulated that Connor Garland's name has been thrown around a little bit. A team like Boston potentially being interested. I could not understand the thought of wanting to trade Connor Garland. I simply can't. I mean, again, you get kind of like that one positive to this season. And the idea of, we're going to have to re-sign him. And talking about the Bruins and talking about the discussion surrounding Jake DeBrusk, and people have been like, DeBrusk for Virtanen? Yeah, no. But if you want to talk Jake DeBrusk and maybe even the Bruins first, because the Coyotes don't have theirs, DeBrusk a first, and obviously other pieces involved from the Coyotes, but the main piece from the Coyotes being Connor Garland, I would take that trade. I am all in on the Connor Garland hype train at this rate. I simply don't understand the move for the Coyotes at this stage. And it's got to be very, very frustrating at this rate to be a Coyotes fan. I mean, we already had Deke Slayer bare his soul within the last month. And unfortunately, it's only gone downhill even further since.
Yeah, someone should check on him.
Nah, he's fine. He's just being a dad.
When you look at Garland, I mean, this is really at least. So he's an RFA. He's going to have to get paid, right? And this is really the first year he's put up those elite numbers. So I think for maybe the way that Arizona, and I'm just trying to find some reasoning. This isn't necessarily what I believe or what I would do, but I think maybe the way Arizona is looking at it is like, hey, this guy's only been good for 30 games in his entire career, and the market's low enough that we might be able to get a first round pick out of this and then not have to pay this guy based on 30 games of performance. And so maybe that's the way they're looking at it. Maybe that's why he's on the block. I mean, that's an overly conservative way of being a general manager of a team, especially a team that is scraping for anything to not fold.
I mean, you look at this team too, and Texie, I'll throw it to you in a second if you have any talking points, let me know. But, you look at this team too that has a lot of deals coming up at the end of the year, including 5 of the 7 defensemen on their current active roster on cap friendly. Goligoski, Chalmerson, Demers, Osterley, Liabushkin, all up at the end of the year. Antti up at the end of the year as well. Yeah, have fun trying to sort through that. I mean, there is going to be money to spend. I would spend it on Connor Garland, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see what Bill Armstrong has in mind as the head coach of this team. Texky, anything to mention, or should we just breeze through the other 2 California teams here?
I would be so depressed if the Bruins got Connor Garland. He's a little bit taller than Marchand, and he doesn't play like a douchebag, but he reminds me of Marchand a little, just like the way he could score and he could grind it out. I would be super pissed if the Bruins got him, because that would be a huge get.
I would be so happy to. I mean, no disrespects to the likes of Kyle Palmieri. I'd like Kyle Palmieri too, to be honest, although I'm concerned because, you look at certain advanced metrics and you're starting to see a whole heavy decline. And is that a fluke from being on a New Jersey team that's not that good? I don't know. You talk about like Rickard Rakell too, and no. So yeah, Connor Garland's at the probably the top of my wish list right now for names that I'm seeing thrown around. Speaking of being at the top of a wish list, Patrick Marleau's open to be traded away from San Jose because he wants to win a goddamn cup, and he's definitely not going to do it in a Sharks uniform, which I say somewhat solemnly. I think, again, for someone like growing up, and it's like the myth of Ray Bourque, or not the myth, but the legend of Ray Bourque in terms of, God, is this guy like the best defenseman of all time? Is he going to retire without a cup? And then it happens. And obviously we've been at that stage for so long now with Marleau, with Thornton. I mean, for the Penguins, I hate to say it, but I kind of wish you lost and still beat. I'm cool with you beating Nashville, but God, I wish San Jose had won that cup because, again, we've talked about their issues a ton. But this past week, you lose to Vegas, you drop 2 to St. Louis before beating the Kings. It's just bad. Like, there aren't too many new developments or talking points to be had there. Devin Dubnyk's save percentage is back over 900. It's just not going to happen this year or perhaps anytime soon for the Sharks.
Yeah. See you next decade, San Jose.
The only thing they have going for him is what I believe his name's Curtis Gabriel, just trying to fight everyone every game. So,
it's funny
sure
when
Sin is enjoying that.
When we had Sin on the show, that was the guy he talked about. He's like, at least Curtis Gabriel is here to at least like show that he cares and to try. And that's dire. Like when Curtis Gabriel is your guy to be like, this is the guy that at least tries. That's rough. And in fairness, that guy got dealt a bad hand. It looked like he might have made the Flyers at a training camp a couple of years ago, and then he got hurt. But so I'm happy for him personally. He seems like a good dude. But yeah, that's just a dire situation. And then you have the Anaheim Ducks in the basement of this division, by far the worst team, that minus 40 goal differential for them. Over the past week, you got clobbered by Colorado 8-4. You did beat Arizona in overtime before losing to them 5-1, and then they lost to Minnesota on Monday. The only real highlight I can say for them, that first game with Jamie Drysdale. He and Trevor Zegras both looking good in that particular game. I mean, Drysdale has 2 points in 3 games, and that was the conversation, right? Is this guy, from a lot of Ducks fans, is this guy going to be ready jumping into this lineup? Especially when you look at Ottawa, the controversial take of Jake Sanderson over Drysdale. And Drysdale's in this lineup, and he doesn't necessarily look out of place. So for Ducks fans, I mean, yeah, it's got to be miserable. Seeing John Gibson with an 894 has to be miserable. But it's at the stage where you got to kind of view it as Sens fans and say, okay, hopefully we are able to ship off some pieces, but enjoy those younger guys in the lineup because they do have a very young lineup at this stage. And I mean, the back half of this decade, I hate to say that. I don't know for sure if the next couple of years are going to just kind of be a wash and forgettable. But the back half of this decade, if the Ducks play their cards right, they're going to be a very, very competitive team with the talent they have, unless they do something stupid like trading Troy Terry.
For Jack Eichel.
Okay, maybe that wouldn't be so dumb, but
I would totally take. I totally take Zegras and Jamie Drysdale for Eichel. Not gonna lie.
I don't. In fairness, I don't think they do that. I understand why, as a Sabres fan, obviously, you got to be like, hey, this please, because the thought of giving up a slam dunk like Jack Eichel. But, I mean, hey, in terms of postulating, are the Ducks a team that have the assets to go out and get a Jack Eichel? Yes. Who knows if that would happen, though, of course.
I don't think they will. They need a lot more than Jack Eichel.
That is true. Deej, any thoughts on the Ducks, or are we moving? I mean, we got to move east one way or another to either the east or the central. What are you thinking?
Yeah. I'm thinking it's time to talk about the central.
It's time to talk about the central. Let's start at the top. The Tampa Bay Lightning. Because honestly, there wasn't too much to say. They're unbelievable. Andrei Vasilevsky, within the past week, became only the second goaltender in NHL history with 3 win streaks of 10-plus games in his career. The only other guy to do it is Martin Brodeur, who did it 4 times. Vasi's already done it 3 times. And Vasi is the first to do it in 3 consecutive seasons. Again, I will continue to eat crow for this, and rightfully so. With Vasilevsky, after last season, you could look at some of the stats and say, good goalie who's carried by a great team? Or is he actually a great goalie? He's proven this year he's a great goalie. I mean, there's no denying it. And I mean, obviously for Tampa, it's huge because you talk about the effect that has because of that new contract kicking in. 4 wins in the past week. Victor Hedman is leading that team in points. Maybe not in point percentage, but in points. And again, Vasilevsky right now, you might need to find a better backup. McElhaney's really struggled, and obviously you don't want to run Vasi into the ground, but without a doubt, the Vezina favorite right now. He's just insane, and so are the Tampa Bay Lightning in general.
Yeah, you see how bad this team is in front of Curtis McElhinney. And I think it goes to show you how good Andrei Vasilevsky is. And obviously we'll get to the Panthers in a little bit, but it finally happened where Florida and Tampa finally had the game that we've waited 30 years for, and now the fan bases fucking hate each other. So we got that to look forward to. But yeah, Tampa, I don't think there's a lot you can say other than they look awesome. Carolina, I mean, Carolina's they're doing that one thing that happens in the Central Division where you play against a bunch of teams where no one cares about, and so there's just not a lot of news about you. That said, Dougie Hamilton, he's in the middle of that 12-game point streak, and he, if I'm not mistaken, he needs to get paid and completely destroy this roster at the end of this year.
That man's gonna get paid.
He should, and I mean, who's to say what would have happened long term with Hamilton in Boston? It haunts me to no end that the Bruins let go of this guy.
So many museums.
Like I said, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened and if they would have been able to hold on to him, the whole butterfly effect of it. I'm not saying Dougie Hamilton and Charlie McAvoy would have been on the same team, but the argument there, oh, well, if you never got rid of Hamilton, would you have drafted McAvoy? Maybe not. And then maybe they would have had the forward that they desperately needed. Dougie Hamilton's unreal. He's just unreal. And like Deej said, he is going to this is Carolina's year because they're going to have some roster turnover at the end of this because, again, yeah, Dougie Hamilton is absolutely going to get paid. And then again, too, with them,
he's going to sign his name and close a window.
Like at the end of the year, though, like they do have some money coming off the books, right? Like they have $5 million in cap space right now. You have to worry about Warren Fogle, Brock
straight to
McGinn,
Dougie,
Jordan Martinook, Cedric Paquette. But here's the issue, Deej. Do you know who else's contract is up at the end of this year? Big player on the Hurricanes who needs to get paid. Andrei Svechnikov.
That's not the end of Trocheck, right?
No, but
Jesus.
Andrei Svechnikov
Good luck.
is an RFA at the end of this year, as is, for that matter, and I've talked about him already today, but working his way into the Calder conversation, Alex Nedeljkovic. If he keeps getting paid like this, Reimer and Mrazek's deals are both up at the end of the year, and I could see the Canes running with Nedeljkovic, which has been the plan for years. It's just at 25, is he going to develop? So you have to worry at the end of this season about all three of your goalies being up. Nedeljkovic, thankfully, an RFA. Jake Bean, still on this roster. He's going to be an RFA. But Hamilton's up. Svechnikov is up. Where is that money coming from necessarily? I think you try to find a way to get rid of a Jake Gardner or a Brady Shea immediately, especially Brady Shea. Carolina's going to have a very, very interesting offseason. Like you mentioned with the Hurricanes too, I guess the past week there wasn't that much to talk about. But Tougie, any thoughts about the Lightning or I guess more so the Hurricanes here in the past week or so?
I think I'm good. I'm just sick of these southern teams that are just better than the Sabers. And they didn't even exist when I was born. You don't know the struggle. You don't have to shovel snow.
Fantastic.
I think that's why the good players sign with us.
I mean, the lack of snow.
They don't have to shovel snow.
I wish I could go to BB&T Arena and not wear my mask and watch a hockey game and have a hot dog.
Well, speaking of BB&T Center and hot dogs, the Florida Panthers, Deej, in the past week, they had a 1-1 split with Nashville, and they lost to Tampa. I don't really have too many talking points about the Cats on this one. I will leave it up to you two, or to you two here. What do you guys think? I mean, again, the normal talking points of, hey, Drieger, hey, this. I got nothing else aside from that. Tell me about the Cats in the past week.
I watched that Tampa Bay Florida game, and I really want them to play in the playoffs. Like, that will be electric if they meet in the playoffs.
Yeah, especially if the refs take 2 fucking goals away on bullshit rule calls like they did against that game in that game. It has been so long since I have watched a Florida Panthers game and have been livid when I turn the TV off. There were at least 10 posts on Reddit of people that weren't even like Panthers or Lightning fans posting from different angles, explaining how Duclair scored a goal, even though the refs did everything they could to get rid of it. I don't know what you do. Duclair was on a breakaway, shoots the puck. It goes under McElhinney. McElhinney gets ran into by his own player. He goes completely into the net. There's not a single part of McElhinney that is across the red line. And because there's no clear camera view of the puck under McElhinney, even though there was no whistle blown, they couldn't rule it a goal, which is the dumbest rule ever. And then the other goal that was taken away was the dreaded offsides call, but not offsides because they scored on a rush play. An offsides call that negated a goal that was scored 90 seconds later. And, you know, I don't know. I was very upset after that game. And I think, I mean, the Panthers looked great. They looked better than the Lightning that entire game. I mean, you look at the very end, like, I don't know. I mean, both sides will agree here, whether you're a Tampa fan or a Florida fan, that was the worst officiating I've ever seen. Like, just there was no consistency to it for either team. And I think that just goes to our argument earlier where you need eyes in the sky.
I was about to say, yeah, right. The same argument happens to come up again. Architect, anything to mention, or do we go talk about the pride of Buffalo in Patrick Kane in Chicago?
I will say one more thing about the Panthers. This is breaking news. Brett Connolly is back. He's playing tonight. He's suiting up. He's sharpening the skates.
They play at 7 tonight?
They play at 8. It's prime time against Chicago, baby, the Windy City.
Just on the north side, not the south.
Oh, God. So, I mean, speaking of Chicago then, only 2 games in the past week. They lost to Tampa twice. No real talking points here, for me, at least with them. Again, just one of those teams. It's like, okay, it was another week. You ran into a buzzsaw. Could still hit upon the same points of, hey, Kevin Lankinen's kept this team afloat. Patrick Kane has kept this team afloat. But not really too much to discuss there. Again, one of those teams where it's like, okay, you're on the bubble of can you kind of hold on? it's the two teams that are behind them that make this a little bit more interesting, or really the three teams, because you talk about, the locks. Tampa, Carolina, and Florida are making the playoffs out of the Central, but that fourth spot is very much up for grabs.
It just seems like the spot that nobody wants. It's
you
like,
take it. No, you take
even
it.
Nashville could honestly make the playoffs with everyone is injured on their team.
I mean, you look at these bottom five teams, right? Chicago's currently in fourth with a minus 11 goal differential. Columbus is in fifth with a minus 20. Nashville in sixth with a minus 26. Dallas 7 with a plus 5, and Detroit with a minus 33. Which one of these teams is going to fumble their way into the playoffs is the question. For Columbus, there really aren't that many talking points, I would say, in terms of pointing out the team specifically. But yeah, over the past week, you got an overtime and a shootout win against Carolina, and then played them for the third time. You lost 3-0. They actually played Carolina 4 times in a row. That next game's on Thursday. So, 2 out of 3 so far against the Hurricanes, and that easily you can work your way back in. For Dallas as well, there aren't really that many talking points. You look at the past week for them in terms of trying to crawl their way back. You lose to Tampa, you lose to Detroit, which, talk about, which one of these teams wants it the most. I mean, 1-1 split Detroit, and then you lost to Nashville, which is a big part of the reason as to why Nashville's in the conversation. And the Preds, too, as of late. All that talk of, oh my God, they might sell. I still feel like they're the most interesting team to talk about here out of the ones that could possibly still make it. Sorry, Detroit. But Nashville's the most interesting one because I think they're in the New York Rangers situation that they were in a couple of years ago. You get a 1-1 split against Florida, then you beat Dallas. You could probably make the playoffs if you're Nashville. You have to make that decision like the Rangers did. Oh, do we want to push for the playoffs and probably lose, or do we still blow it up even though we have a fighting chance? I mean, we're 4 points back of Chicago. That is not an insurmountable lead. It's just all of these teams: Chicago, Columbus, Dallas, Nashville. Out of those 4, who do you guys think takes that fourth spot? Deej, I'll throw it to you first.
I think, I don't think it's going to be Nashville. I can completely rule out Nashville at this point. I mean, they got some fluky wins this week, but those were entirely, Nashville didn't win those games. UC Saros did.
Oh, that game against Florida was insane. He stopped 22 shots in the first period.
Yeah, insane. I believe in the 2 games against Nashville, in something like 93 shots, they only scored on UC Saros 3 times. So, I mean, Saros can't stay hot that long. He's just not going to drag this team into a playoff spot. I feel like Columbus has too many fundamental issues for it to all just suddenly start working. I think it's between Chicago and Dallas right now. And when I look at these two teams, Chicago's lost their last 4. It's about to be 5 in a row. Dallas has so many games in hand, and I think they are missing one forward to be able to get this going. And Alexander Radulov has only played 11 games, and he's gonna come back any game now. I think that changes this team, and they put together a small win streak. Then, I mean, it's between Dallas and Chicago, and
I think you could.
I'm still going to go Chicago.
I think you could pose it as which injuries are more devastating: Chicago without Taves, Dallas being without Radulov, without Sagan, and just the effect that
Bishop
has. So, I think I'm with you there. That I'd probably bet on Chicago, like you said. Columbus, I think the Tortorella issues. He probably avoids being fired until the end of the season, but it is between Chicago and Dallas, in my opinion, as well. I want to say Dallas because of how devastating it would be to go from Cup final appearance to out, but I'm not sure. It's definitely between those two. Texky, what do you think?
I think Chicago's going to stub their toe and make it, but Dallas still has a few games in hand, and they're only 5 back, so I could totally see them making it. But yeah, I think Chicago is going to make it. I think Kane is just going to pull some magic out of his ass, and they do have a semi-solid roster that's not mostly uninjured, so yeah, I think Chicago will make it. But the only thing I could say is that a really good team in the East is going to miss. I would say a really good team in the East, maybe a decent team in the East is going to make it, and a really bad team in the Central is going to make it. So
it's interesting how it panned out. That bad team, though, won't be Detroit. I just wanted to shout out Jonathan Bernier for continuing to be amazing, and Robbie Fabry for scoring a hat trick. There you go, Red Wings fans. Continue to enjoy and embrace the suck, because you suck. It is by design, though. Any other talking points before, Texie, it sounded like I might have cut you off there, but any other talking points about the wonderful Discover Central, or are we moving on to the main event? Sounds like it's the main event.
The main event.
I think it's time.
For the Washington Capitals right now, obviously the highlights, Ovechkin took sole possession of 6th all-time in goals. Only one person has required less amount of games to hit that mark. Ovi hit it in 1,177 games. Wayne Gretzky hit it in 925, because Jesus. The Caps won 7-0 without Tom Wilson, and then lost the first game with him back. And they re-signed Trevor Van Riemsdyk for 2 years at $950K per. So for Washington right now, a lot of people thought that they'd fall off. I don't really see that at this stage. They did just lose to the Rangers, which isn't necessarily ideal. But all things considered, for the Caps, I mean, a 2-1 week. They get New Jersey on a back-to-back. They get to play the Rangers again. I don't think the Caps are in any sort of danger here.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, we're going to see this team continue to do great things. They've been on a crazy upward trajectory for the last, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and no signs of slowing down, even without Tom Wilson.
When Ovi gets 1 or 2, he's just going to get hot, and he's hot right now. When he's hot, he just does not slow down, and he really wanted that milestone, and he's just going to keep going.
As all hockey fans wait to see if lockouts and COVID are going to cost him the record.
Russian bear.
The New York Islanders as well. An interesting week for them. They lost to Washington. They lost to Philly and then kicked Philly's ass. And actually ended up winning another game against the Flyers. So an interesting week for them. They continue to do good things. They had that feel-good story for Thomas Hickey, working his way back into the lineup. But obviously the big thing right now for the Islanders, Captain Anders Lee, out for the season. Still expect them to make the playoffs at this stage. I mean, even without Anders Lee, they're 8-2 in their last 10. Barry Trotz, we say it every week, best coach in the league. And obviously now we wait to see what trade the Islanders are going to pull off, because I'm sure they're going to do something.
Yeah, you have to. You'll be able to drag this team into the playoff. This team's definitely a playoff team, but this team, Boston, Pittsburgh, Washington, Philadelphia, all of their possible opponents, you're not going to be able to keep up with without Anders Lee.
It's just Barry Trotz has just carried this team. It's one of the most unimpressive teams I've seen on paper, and they're just amazing. And they get to beat up on the Sabers 12 times, so that's fine.
To the Boston Bruins we go then, where, not the greatest week in the history of the team. I do want to shout out David Krejci for hitting 700 career points. Dan Darth Vladar for putting up possibly the save of the year in a Bruins, we'll call it controversial win over the Pittsburgh Penguins, of course, because of the whole Tanev situation. But yeah, winning that game, beating Buffalo, again, the dumpster fire game, as it's been deemed. And of course, they've had their last 2 games now suspended due to COVID concerns, with the likes of David Pasternak, DeBrusk, Krejci, Craig Smith, Sean Corrali all being on the protocol list within the past few days. So we'll see what happens there. In terms of any other interesting talking points, I got to be honest, it's kind of a good thing this isn't just specifically a Bruins-centric podcast, because I'd have to keep hitting the same points of, well, we're waiting for this. We're waiting to see. Is there going to be a deal? Is this guy going to turn it around? All I'll say is the same thing I've said for the past couple of years. The Bruins are set up very well in terms of goaltending for the future, with Vladar, who has the AHL experience, Jeremy Swayman, who was NCAA Goalie of the Year last year. That's at least one thing I'm not worried about for the Bruins in terms of, and I mentioned it, right, that core of Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, as they get up there in age and eventually won't be here anymore. For the Bruins in goal, at least, they should be okay with the guys that they have already. So that's a bit of a relief. And I think Deej, obviously, I mean, all three of us, really, if you think about it. I mean, Deej for the Florida Panthers, obviously, Spencer Knight was amazing in the NCAA this year. Devin Levi, who knows? But then Texas, you have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as someone to look forward to as well. So there are those fan bases that are kind of the haves and the have-nots in terms of, you know, having confidence in their goaltending in the future, or at least having that guy that you could sit there and say, yeah, hopefully he develops, because if he does, we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I think it takes, I mean, like, not having a goalie is your team's gonna fall apart, and you're gonna be constantly searching for one. I think in any sort of rebuild or continual build process, having a good upcoming goalie is part of extending your window. So I don't know, it's less to think about.
Texie, any thoughts on the Bruins, or am I moving on? I think I know the answer.
We can move on.
All right.
Sick of talking about them.
We go to Pittsburgh, the other team here, where honestly, it's a similar situation, right, as in the other divisions. We've talked about Buffalo a lot in the basement. Let's not beat that dead horse. New Jersey as well, that minus 19 goal differential. You're probably not going to make it. Shout out to Jack Hughes for catching his stride. You really don't have too many talking points there. But it's Pittsburgh, Philly, and the New York Rangers that you look at. And Pittsburgh with a pretty good, you know, heads up, or, you know, I guess a leg up on the competition here. Philadelphia, I mean, the minus 13 goal differential, whereas the Rangers are at a plus 12. I know, obviously, one certain 9-0 game helped out a lot. With Pittsburgh, I wouldn't say there are too many talking points, for me at least this week. Let me know if you guys disagree. But, you know, losses to the Bruins, they lost to the Devils twice, losing 2 out of 3. So it was a pretty rough week for them. But aside from that, I think they're obviously the favorite to make it. But you talk about Philadelphia and New York. Again, for the Rangers, I don't think they were ever going to make the playoffs this year. I was quoted in that. The Flyers, I thought, could make it to the Cup final. But you look at this again, the Rangers kicked the hell out of Philly 9-0, despite the Rangers missing their entire coaching staff. Zibanejad in that game set a franchise record for points in a single period. He had 3 goals, 3 assists, and he became the second player in NHL history to get 6 points in a single period alongside Brian Trottier, which is nuts. And aside from that, for the Rangers, I mean, yeah, you lose Jack Johnson for the year. People will debate the negative aspect of that, but Capo Caco ended a 19-game goal drought. And then for Philly, the narrative right now, like the only real talking point is Elliot Friedman saying, and I quote, "I could see Philly considering someone like Mark Stahl if they're not going to go after someone like Ryan Ellis." What the hell has happened to the Flyers? And the conversation of, can the Flyers catch Pittsburgh? It might be, can the Rangers catch Pittsburgh? Because Philly might be dead in the water at this stage. It's ridiculous.
I think Pittsburgh is one of those teams that finds a way. And when I look at Pittsburgh's roster and their ability to get the most out of their players, Mike Matheson has a positive plus minus. Like, I mean, if they can do the impossible, you're not going to catch up to them, and they've done the impossible.
I don't know. The 2 players they have are just always going to be good, and it's just one of those teams. And they're just going to continually beat up on New Jersey and Buffalo. And I will say about the Rangers, when Panarin is in the lineup, they are just a completely different team. And it's just so dramatic from what this team, the Rangers, looked like last week to what they looked like this week. And Zibanejad just loves playing with Panarin. It's insane.
So, to end this podcast, then let's go out on a limb here. Let's say the Caps, Islanders, and Bruins all make the playoffs. If you had to bet today, that fourth spot, Pittsburgh, Philly, or the New York Rangers, Texky, what are you going with?
New York Rangers.
Hot take, Deej. The wheels are churning.
They are.
The wheels are really churning.
I don't know. I think they're locked in. I don't think Philly's going to put it together.
All right, so there you have it.
It's just such a contrast then from the Central, the last spot, because like in the East, the teams are like good and they have like solid players, and in the Central, it's like who's not going to be injured and who's just going to stumble in. And
that's a fair point.
In the East, one team is going to have a decent record and is going to miss. It's just the side effect of the COVID schedule this year. So
definitely,
I do have a small story, and I'm glad both of you are here because I want both your takes on this to end this podcast with. Are you guys aware of what comes out on Friday?
Baja Blast?
It's a TV show.
No.
That's right, and I knew you guys were so excited you wouldn't forget about it. That's right, the Mighty Ducks Game Changers, the live-action Mighty Ducks series starring Emilio Estevez, comes out on Friday to Disney+.
I have zero interest in this.
I kind of want to watch it just for the memes.
I hope, yeah. I mean, I hope it's like as critically acclaimed as like Cobra Kai is, to help kind of, bring I don't want to say like a dead franchise, but you get what I mean, to turn things around a little bit.
Okay.
But
well, let me tell you what goes on in the series in the vein of Cobra Kai. The premise of the story is the Mighty Ducks are this unstoppable powerhouse of a hockey team. And they cut the young main character, Evan Morrow, played by 12-year-old Brady Noon, who you've never heard of before because he's 12. And he goes and he starts a new team that is now coached by Gordon Bombay. That's right. The Ducks are the bad guys.
Are they the Mightier Ducks?
I don't know. I know Dylan Playfair's in it. Jim Playfair's son, who's also a star of Letterkenny. So we'll see. I'm excited. I'm going to watch it.
I'm pretty sure this is just a biography of Brett Hull going over to Team USA when he could have played for Team Canada at the Olympics.
Oh, God.
That sounds terrible, and I'm not going to watch it.
Oh, God. I'm just going to say, I mean, what's the name of the team? Because if we have the Mighty Ducks, like, do we have, like, the Fearsome Quackers on the other side? Like, what is the name of this new team? You didn't even know, and you posed to be a fan of the show already. Unbelievable.
It's because they haven't revealed the branding because it's Disney.
Fair.
And they keep things behind closed doors.
Fair.
Even all the photos of the kids practicing, they're just wearing black jerseys. Although the only thing that's come out is the evil Mighty Ducks logo. It's pretty good. Like, I think the real Ducks should switch their logo to the evil Mighty Ducks logo because it's pretty great.
I do have a spoiler alert. The Mighty Ducks, the mean Mighty Ducks team is coached by Goldberg.
I'm pretty sure he's not involved in the show, though, was the word, right?
I mean, he's sobered up.
Yeah, he
put on like 20 pounds.
I think I saw the quote, though, that he got left out of it. So
no, I'm totally trolling. That's not a thing.
I mean, I know, but I'm saying in general, with him, I don't expect him to be in the show. But
I mean, I don't think any of the original kids are in it.
There are some of them. I've seen the.
Yeah, I saw
the cast list. The dude who played.
Banks. Banks looked like a friggin' 75-year-old dad.
Oh, dude, and then Eldon Henson, who you know from Ashton Kutcher's Only movie.
Dude, where's my car?
No, we don't recognize that here. The Butterfly Effect, the best movie. But yeah, shout out to Eldon Henson. He's a good actor. Anyway,
3 hours later.
Just about.
Looks like the good team's called the Hawks.
Tremendous.
Oh, they're called the Hawks. Okay, it's like it's a role reversal.
Oh, so the new team is the Hawks? I don't want to root for... It literally has Cobra Kai where you're rooting for
because they were the bad guys before.
Screw you, Disney. Screw you turning my childhood around. I don't like it. You can follow Deej on Twitter at DJ.
Listen, I'm stoked.
1088. Architect on Twitter at @1 am the architect. And of course myself at Tougie24. Screw the Hawks. Go Ducks. Go Avs. Go Bruins. Boy, my fandom is not.
Bring back Goldberg.
I'm also on Slovenian Twitter as @DeesUSA.
Suck it, Slovenia. Where were you in World War II?
We're cutting that part out.
Probably part of Slovakia.
Oh, God. God bless Slovenia.
Land that I love.